Hello and welcome to the X-Files video. Today I will be briefly recapping, reviewing, and tier ranking 100 episodes of the X-Files. Here's what you need to know before we begin. First of all, I am not doing the first 100 episodes. I have selected 100 episodes from the entire series to cover. Number two, I know many folks will put on my videos while they work or work out or try to go to sleep, having never watched whatever series I'm covering, which I think is super awesome and daring and exciting, by the way. So hello if that's you. I'm going to do my very best to make sure you can sort of follow what's going on, but this isn't an entire recap. Part of the reason I'm summarizing each episode before I rank it, though, is so that people who've never seen the series can still listen to the video. There are spoilers for the entire series, with the exception, I suppose, of the revival, which I will not be covering at all. I can absolutely promise you, though, that watching the X-Files is its own experience, so watching this video won't mean you can never watch the X-Files and be surprised by it. I just thought I would throw that out there. Let me briefly share what the different tiers are. At the very top, we have the God tier. The God tiers are episodes that are amazing, nearly flawless, but are also favorite episodes of mine. The God tier will probably be limited to like 15 episodes. And below that, we have the excellent tier. These episodes might be just as good in quality as the God tier, but they just don't quite make it into my list of favorites. Next is the solid tier. This is for episodes of the X-Files that you can watch and go, yeah, that's a pretty good X-Files episode. Below that is fine, kind of self-explanatory. The episode isn't great, but it's not necessarily bad. Maybe it's a very memorable episode, but is flawed in some ways, or the other way around. Below that is not the best, for episodes that are just kind of not the best. And below that is the oh boy category, where we start to get some episodes that are pretty iffy, episodes that I would probably skip upon rewatching the series, unless I'm like doing a completionist rewatch. There also may be some absolutely terrible episodes in here that have like one redeeming quality that keep it from being at the very bottom. Our bottom tier is called FBI's Most Unwanted, and this tier is for episodes that do more harm than good, or that waste time, especially if it's a Mythos episode. I'll get into what that means in a moment. Or episodes that feel redundant or contrived. I'm going to be covering episodes in order, although, as I mentioned before, episodes will be skipped. All of this is a preliminary ranking. I'm going to go through everything and rank it, maybe make a few minor adjustments as I go. After I cover all 98 episodes in 2 films, we will look at the list as a whole and make adjustments, and that will be the final tier ranking. Finally, my last note for this intro, there are 2 types of X-Files episodes. First are mythology episodes, mythos episodes, myth arc episodes, whatever you want to call it. These are the episodes that deal with the lore and mythology of the series as a whole. Somewhere around 8 per season, so a third of the episodes. I am not covering every single mythos episode in this video either, because I don't hate myself. The other type of episode are the Monster of the Week episodes. So these are more episodic and procedural in nature, and it covers Mulder and Scully on a specific case. Now, you may be thinking, if you've never seen the X-Files, oh, so there's the plot and then the filler. No. You could not be more mistaken. Respectfully, you could not be more mistaken. The heart and soul of the X-Files lies in the Monster of the Week episodes. If you only watch the myth arc, you will have an absolutely miserable time, okay? Unless I say it's a myth arc episode, you can assume it's Monster of the Week. Okay, we can actually start discussing the series. Thanks for hanging with me for that intro, but I just feel like it's important that we establish all the important things before we really get into it. So, let's dive into the episode that started it all, the pilot. In the pilot episode, Dana Scully is assigned to the X-Files, a unit within the FBI where she joins Mulder in solving cases that are paranormal, supernatural, or extraterrestrial in nature. Dana Scully has a background as a medical doctor, but she left medicine to pursue work at the Bureau, which she feels would help establish herself. This episode is Dana Scully and Fox Mulder's first case together, and the case takes them to Oregon, where several teenagers have gone missing, including a young man named Billy Miles. Among other characters, we meet a man referred to colloquially as CSM, which stands for Cigarette Smoking Man. He's also known throughout the series as simply Smoking Man or Cancer Man, but I will mostly be calling him CSM. At the end of the episode, CSM takes evidence from their case and tucks it away in the Pentagon. This episode marks the beginning of Mulder and Scully's partnership. There's some fantastic and memorable scenes in this episode, including their first meeting. There's also a scene in the rain with a great blooper reel, and then a scene in their motel room where Mulder opens up to Scully about what led him to pursue the X-Files. And that is the abduction of his younger sister, Samantha, when he was a kid. She was taken by aliens into a UFO in the middle of the night and was never seen again. Hypnosis and therapy for Mulder to remember these repressed memories, but once he did, he became interested in finding the truth about what happened to Samantha. And heads up, the truth is something we're going to be hearing a lot in the series. The episode introduces a lot of promising mysteries, and essentially they are investigating a potential alien abduction, and then people being returned. With the pilot, they set out to make a really scary episode. Series creator and showrunner Chris Carter wanted to scare the shit out of people. And so on one hand, aliens are scary, and on the other hand, the fact that the government might know about these things that are scary and are doing nothing to protect us, or maybe using them to potentially harm us in some way, is also scary. So there's kind of the two factors there. These two things are something we will discuss a lot as the series goes on. This episode feels very different tonally from the rest of the show. It took a little bit, in my opinion, for the X-Files to find its stride, which is pretty typical for a television series. I will tell you when we get to the point where I feel like the X-Files gets good. It's an iconic episode. It's fun to watch back, but there are some issues with it, which I'm going to discuss when we get to the end of the next episode. I am putting the pilot in the solid category. Episode 2 is called Deep Throat. I will explain why momentarily. In this episode, a missing test pilot leads the agents to investigate an air base in an area that reportedly has high levels of UFO activity. This episode essentially is about military cover-ups and conspiracies, specifically regarding alien technology and the weaponization of such technology. At one point, Mulder is taken in by the military for trespassing on the airbase, and Scully has to make a trade and hold a man at gunpoint in order to save him. Already very badass, already very ride or die, and we are only on episode 2. This episode gets its title from the introduction of a character whose name is Deep Throat. He serves as Mulder's informant. At the conclusion of the episode, Deep Throat and Mulder meet to discuss extraterrestrials, and Deep Throat tells Mulder, quote, "They've been here a long, long time." He is not telling Mulder this in an official capacity. He is an informant who is telling Mulder aliens really do exist. This episode is a good time to begin to discuss the mythos problem. The mythos of the X-Files is introduced piece by piece throughout its 11 seasons and 2 films. It leaves mysteries for us to be solved seasons later, and this practice reminds me of another sci-fi show which is well known for its confusing mythology, Lost. However, where Lost employs the so-called mystery box, where you essentially tell the audience there's a mystery but don't give them any answers as a way to get them to continue watching, I recently began to realize that the problem with the X-Files is not that there's a mystery box we never get answers for. Instead, what we have is a mystery junk drawer where various things are discarded, and instead of compelling us to continue watching because we want the answers, they hope that we will see one of the items in the junk drawer, think it's intriguing, and choose to continue watching, because maybe there will be more intriguing things. Now, what do I mean by mystery junk drawer? I mean, we already know so much information by the end of episode 2. I'm going to read a list of mythology elements established in, once again, the first 2 episodes. Abductions, human experimentation, time loss, metallic implants, destroying evidence by fire or force, experimental spacecraft, military cover-ups, recovery of extraterrestrial biological entities, locking evidence in the Pentagon, informants who know everything but won't say it. You're going to have to dig really deep to give us a mythos episode that doesn't explore a new concept. And I think that is part of the reason why the mythos becomes so complicated. They threw so much out there. It's overwhelming as I think the pilot is fine, but what frustrates me specifically with Deep Throat, and then with a few more mythos episodes in the early seasons, is the idea that the government is conspiring against the American people and allowing these things to happen, these bad things to happen that we see on the show. That's scary. But one, how can we make that terror into an active plot? Because you have to remember, the nature of the show is not mythos, 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 mythos. It's a little bit of mythos, and now we're going to just goof around with some monsters, and then mythos, and then there's gonna be some spooky monsters. We've set the stakes so high and made them so immediate. Like, this is a horrifying conspiracy against the American people, and now we're just gonna go about our daily jobs. And on one hand, that could be compelling because that is lifelike, but also, we are not all in a TV series about aliens, okay? The show already is struggling to decide if it wants to be about conspiracies or if it wants to be about aliens. One has to be more important than the other. And a big problem with the X-Files is that it never decides. I will continue to provide supporting evidence for this as the video goes on, but the biggest problem with Mythos is that the X-Files never decides. It makes an attempt to in certain points, and it fails miserably because it's just way too late and they're digging their own grave. And when I first watched the episode, I watched Deep Throat and I thought I was not going to like this show at all, but luckily I kept going. But because Deep Throat is kind of the blueprint for so many miserable episodes to come, I'm putting it in the who boy category. Next up, we have our first Monster of the Week episode. It's called Squeeze. A serial killer by the name of Eugene TOOMS reaches victims by squeezing into small spaces. He returns every 30 years to devour 5 human livers, build a nest, and then go back into hibernation. This episode is super creepy, and it's still known as one of the scariest episodes of The X-Files. I would also consider it to be one of the most iconic monsters of The X-Files, definitely within the top 5. We get the first of many times Scully will almost die at the hands of a Monster of the Week. Don't worry, Mulder will also have many opportunities to do this. Something mentioned in the pilot, Mulder's nickname at the Academy, Spooky, is brought up again. Scully really begins to develop loyalty towards Mulder and the X-Files. It's one of the best monsters of the series. This is a great episode. I'm putting it in the excellent category. Next up is the Jersey Devil. A monster Mulder suspects may be the Jersey Devil is responsible for disappearances in Atlantic City. The Beast turns out to be this monster woman who descended from Neanderthals. She's looking for food for her children following the loss of her mate, in what is perhaps meant to showcase Mulder's admiration for the natural or the unnatural or supernatural worlds. The local law enforcement is after the Beast and Mulder, wanting to stop his pursuit, and the local law enforcement end up shooting the Beast dead. There are lots of silly moments in this episode. At one point, Mulder holds up a drawing of the alleged Beast, and so, like, that's silly. It's probably a good thing that after 2 very serious, overwhelming mythos episodes and then 1 scary monster, that we can kind of just establish something that's a little more attainable week to week. The episode also features a peek into Scully's love life, or lack thereof. Viewers were still not set on Scully. We get some insight into who Mulder is in the pilot episode, but we never really get that with Scully until this episode when we see a little bit of her private life. So for the first and the only time in this video, I'm gonna say kudos to Chris Carter for having faith in Scully as a character and simply giving her a more personal story in order to give viewers a chance to get better acquainted with her, because Dana Scully, what can I say about Dana Scully that hasn't already been scream typed in all capital letters by every lesbian with an internet connection? The actual investigation I don't really find compelling, and although I enjoy some of the Mulder Scully moments in this episode, we're not exactly in a Mulder and Scully fun or cute moments drought. I will note though, I don't think this is a skippable episode. I saw some discourse about this online the other day. It's not an episode you should skip. You have to get through the first handful of X-Files episodes to really enjoy where it goes. I'm gonna put the Jersey Devil in the not the best tier. I really don't enjoy this episode, but I feel more indifferent than I do hatred. And since I know there's a lot of other episodes that make me more mad than this episode, I'm not gonna put it in oh boy. I'm gonna put it in not the best. I'm so kind. Okay, next up is Shadows. Following the suicide of a defense contractor CEO, a pair of murders in the presence of his former assistant draws attention from the agents. We eventually learned that the CEO felt guilty about making a deal with a terrorist group that led to numerous deaths. During a raid of the office, the Force, this like psychokinetic force that's possibly hers or possibly just left from the man, we don't really know, shows the agents the location of secret information he'd been hiding. And because it knows the location of the secret information, I feel comfortable saying it's like a force from the man who is like still with the young woman. The thing that stood out to me the most in this episode is the performance by the woman who plays the assistant. She was absolutely phenomenal. She's in the living room and people have died, but she's not responsible. This like force is responsible. And the lights go out and she gets upset and yeah, I was very impressed by her performance. As far as the actual plot goes, the military premise sort of works with what we've established so far in Deep Throat. Within the next handful of episodes, there are 2 more that deal with the same idea. So maybe I'll kind of compare how each of them handle it to decide where these ones are ranked. The episode's a little weird, but many such cases. It's not super memorable, but it's not terrible. I'm going to put Shadows in not the best, and I think I'm going to put it below the Jersey Devil, because although I really like the performance in Shadows, I do like the Jersey Devil for snippets of Scully's personal life, and I also love one of the outfits Scully wears in Jersey Devil, and those are important things we must take into account when ranking this many episodes. So next up is Ghost in the Machine. Basically, this is a killer computer at a tech company. It tries to be a thriller episode. Deep Throat is in the episode, and he tells Mulder that the government wants the technology so they can use it for military purposes. This leads the man to regret his inventions. This episode gave us a behind-the-scenes pic in the duct because Scully has to crawl through an air duct at one point. She almost gets sucked into the big fan. It's kind of funny. But when she comes out, she looks like Gale Weathers at the end of Scream. So like, that's fun. But yeah, they have to kill the computer. The computer talks, and as the computer's dying, it's like, no. The computer also kills one of Mulder's former colleagues. It feels a little bit random to use one of Mulder's former colleagues for this episode, but sure, what the hell. Ghost in the Machine is gonna go in not the best beneath Shadows. I'm excited for this next one because we have the episode titled Ice. This is the episode that I watched and said, oh, so this is a really good show. Ice is essentially The Thing, but the X-Files. A parasitic worm is found during ice core excavation research in Alaska. It nests at the base of the neck and affects a person's hormones, which causes them to become paranoid and violent. This resulted in the deaths of everyone on the research team. So the FBI and a few scientists, including one played by Felicity Huffman, who you may know as Lynette Scavo from Desperate Housewives, go up to investigate, and it turns out that one of them is infected, but they aren't sure who it is. It's an episode about paranoia and trust in close quarters with a killer out there, and because it's in such close quarters, it's a very sexy, intimate episode. I mean, like, Mulder and Scully are pointing their guns at each other. They are pulling at each other's clothes to look for signs of infection. Going into the series, I knew that Mulder and Scully were a really big ship. I wasn't completely on board yet, and then I watched this episode and I was like, wait, I kind of get it. Ice is going in the God tier. Next up is Space. A mission is sabotaged at launch. There is another mission that launches successfully, but things begin to go wrong. A woman who works on the launches brings evidence to Mulder and Scully that she got from an unknown source within NASA, and in the end it turns out to be her boss, who's like head of these missions, and he's seeing like faces in the fog. No one really knows. Okay, let's just get out of the way. He is possessed. He is possessed by an extraterrestrial spirit, which it seems he picked up while on a mission to outer space. The stuff that's actually like grounded, like the idea of there being something wrong with a space mission and the investigation around it and trying to figure out who sabotaged it, all that stuff, that was really interesting. I enjoyed that stuff. It's when it gets into this supernatural stuff where it's just kind of contrived. And I want to be clear that I enjoy sci-fi as a genre, and it's not bad because it's sci-fi. It's just that it's bad. Okay? So it's not the best episode, but if I go really hard on every single X-Files episode that has an extraterrestrial or paranormal element that makes no sense, much of this tier list will be in the bottom half of the list. I'm gonna put this right beneath Shadows. I know a lot of people have Space in their like list of top 10 worst X-Files episodes, but honestly, I don't really think that's quite fair because there are many episodes far worse than space. It just has a few silly moments that don't make sense. Next up is Fallen Angel, another Mythos episode. Mulder investigates the scene of a UFO crash in hopes of finding hard evidence of aliens. Unfortunately, he is detained at the site. He meets an alleged abductee named Max. The pair are pursued by law enforcement, and ultimately Max disappears in a beam of light, seemingly re-abducted. Because of Mulder's shenanigans and meddling in this episode, the X-Files unit comes close to being shut down, but Deep Throat vetoes this call, saying that Mulder would be even more dangerous as a whistleblower. Okay, sorry for being such a hater towards so much of season 1, but it's just because there are so many good episodes ahead that these ones aren't good. I hate this episode. I hate this episode. The most frustrating thing about this episode is that Deep Throat feels there is a threat of Mulder becoming a whistleblower, which means there is someone who Mulder could go to and blow this whole thing up should it come to that. It's great that Mulder has a little power, a little leverage here. I suppose I appreciate that we are given some kind of justification why the X-Files isn't just shut down. I would point out, if I were in charge, I'd be like, well, they spend most of their time actually solving real life cases. I mean, they could just assign them more cases and say they're paranormal, and that would kind of keep Mulder and Scully busy, but that's not my business. I don't like this episode. I'm putting Fallen Angel in FBI's Most Unwanted. I'm so sorry. Next up, we have Eve. A pair of murders occur simultaneously on opposite coasts. Mulder believes that aliens may have something to do with it. The culprits turn out to be a pair of twin girls. These girls came to be as a result of genetic engineering as part of a government experiment. They are the last living youth of their kind. Their kind are called Eves. There are grown adults who are also genetic experiments, though many of them have killed themselves. There are 2, it seems, still remaining. One is the fertility doctor who used this genetically modified material to conceive the girls without the patient's consent. Harriet Sansom Harris plays the elder Eves, and she is absolutely phenomenal in this episode, and this is an episode I really enjoy and once considered one of my 3 favorite episodes. However, my gripe with the episode now is how often the X-Files leans on these government research projects to explain the mythos. I think for this episode, I will give it a pass, because at this point in the series, I find it particularly compelling how they are trying to use science to explain some of the monsters we meet, as opposed to all of it being extraterrestrial. I think that is what gives Scully more legitimacy. Therefore, I'm not going to punish this episode for its few downfalls, and I'm going to keep it in the God tier where it belongs. Next, we have Fire. In this episode, a pyrokinetic arsonist targets British dignitaries, which brings Mulder's former partner to the States to request his help on the case. We learn that Mulder has a really big fear of fire, but he conquers this fear in order to save some kids from a burning building when the arsonist tries to kill them. And Scully grapples with some jealousy and some feelings of protectiveness as Mulder and his former partner, Phoebe, who also is his ex-girlfriend, work together on the case. It's made clear that Phoebe hurt Mulder in the past. We aren't really given any information. And they do dance together a bit in this episode, but yeah. Anyways, they do end up catching the man, and he is arrested and he is taken in for some genetic and medical testing. Now's a good time to point out, Mulder and Scully do solve cases. There's kind of like a running joke that Mulder and Scully kind of always let the monster get away, or they do all this investigating and then there is no conclusion. They do make arrests. And now is one of the earlier ones, so I wanted to point that out. Fire is going to go into the fine tier. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It definitely still feels like early X-Files, but it's not a bad episode. Beyond the Sea, Scully's father suddenly passes away and she begins to have visions of him. A man who Mulder once helped profile and arrest claims he has psychic information that can aid the agents in a kidnapping case. Additionally, he tells Scully that he has a message for her from her father. This episode serves as an opportunity for Scully to question her beliefs, and it's the first truly Scully-centric episode, which is very exciting. Gillian Anderson has some fantastic moments in this episode. The first is at Scully's father's funeral when she asks her mother if her father was proud of her despite her choosing to work at the FBI and leave medicine. And her mother replies, "He was your father." The next is when she makes the discovery that the man seems to have some sort of connection to her father when he begins singing Beyond the Sea, the song that played at her father's funeral. Another is when Mulder's life is potentially in danger and she yells at Luther Boggs and threatens basically to be the one who will execute him if anything happens to Mulder because of what he's done. He withholds any information about her father, but he does provide information that helps them find the kidnapping victims. Mulder thinks, though, that Boggs is in on the crimes, and that's how he has the information. But we do get a glimpse of one of the buildings where Scully eventually finds herself, and she heeds a warning from the man, and it prevents her from dying. So I think it definitely is up to interpretation. Maybe the man really does have some psychic abilities. He tells Scully at the end of the episode that she needs to be there as the witness to his execution, and that is when he will tell her the words, but Scully doesn't go. Instead, she goes to the hospital where Mulder is recovering after having been injured, and she explains that she doesn't need to go because she already knows what her father would say, because he was her father. Mulder also questions her willingness to believe, and after all she's seen, why can't she believe? And early on in the episode, there's pushback where Mulder doesn't believe the man is really psychic, and Scully's like, well, why am I the one believing now? So that's cool. The episode has a lot to offer. I am going to put it above Squeeze in the excellent category. Next up, we have E.B.E. Scully and Mulder go on a wild goose chase to search for a UFO that has been shot down and is now being transported through the states. But the whole thing turns out to be faked and meant to misdirect them from actual crazy stuff happening. That actual thing happening being the recovery of an E.B.E, an extraterrestrial biological entity. Mulder eventually reaches the site where the E.B.E is being found. He finds Deep Throat there, but there is no E.B.E, and Deep Throat tells him that long ago, various governments came together and agreed that if an E.B.E were to ever make it to Earth, it is the responsibility of whatever government finds and recovers it to exterminate it. And 3 men have exterminated an E.B.E, and Deep Throat is one of those men. And he feels great guilt for that, and that is why he is now an informant for Agent Mulder. The episode has a few positives. One, it introduces us to the lone gunmen. These 3 silly guys, known as Frohickey, Byers, and Langley, but collectively as the lone gunmen, are always such a delight. I really enjoy the lone gunmen. It also has a very memorable warning that Scully gives Mulder when he is being led around by all these false leads. She tells him, "The truth is out there, Mulder, but so are lies." There are those few things which makes it a better episode than Fallen Angel, so I'm going to put it at the bottom of the who boy category, and I don't think it's really going to go up at all from there. I'm just not really a huge fan of most of the Season 1 mythos. We've got 3 more episodes to cover for Season 1. First is Darkness Falls. A logging project exposes a long hibernating breed of killer bugs. The agents investigate missing loggers as a potential eco-terrorist attack, but they end up fearing for their lives as the sun sets in the woods. This is a very scary monster episode because the bugs will swarm you and create a little cocoon around you and you'll slowly die. It's just so gnarly. I love when Dr. Scully comes out in this episode. She is really trying to determine what these bugs are and what they're doing and how they may have come to be. It's an exciting episode and the stakes feel high because they're in this little cabin, but their generator is slowly running out of fuel, which means they will no longer be able to keep the lights on, which means they will be vulnerable to the killer bugs. And to top it all off, Scully wears one of her most iconic outfits in this episode. I've got her here. This is an artist's depiction of it. Fabulous coat. This is her saying, "I'm a medical doctor." And this is my little Fox Mulder figure. This is a biblically accurate height difference, by the way. Darkness Falls is such a fantastic episode. I am putting it in the God tier. I'm going to put it below Ice, but above Eve. Next is our final Season 1 monster of the week for this video. This episode is called TOOMS. Eugene Toombs, from the episode Squeeze, is released from prison, and he is still 1 kill short of the livers he needs for hibernation. Mulder tells the judge this man should not be let out because he's a killer monster who's been around for 90 years killing people, and the judge thinks that's ridiculous, so Eugene Tooms is let out. But Mulder wants to continue keeping an eye on him because the case, until he is truly locked away for these murders, is still open. We learn more about Tooms' previous crimes. There's some really cool, more procedural stuff in this episode that I really enjoyed. Seeing both Scully and Mulder digging more into the forensic side of thing is really fun, and Mulder and Scully have some very sweet moments in their developing partnership. One such instance occurs during a stakeout when Mulder is sitting outside the home where Tooms is staying, and he's worried that Scully may be putting herself, her reputation, her career on the line by going against orders from the Bureau and choosing to do a stakeout here. She says Fox, and he says he doesn't like being called Fox. He even made his parents call him Mulder. And she says, Mulder, I wouldn't put myself on the line for anybody but you. And this is only season 1. TOOMS is an excellent episode. I think I even like it more than Squeeze. I don't like it more than Beyond the Sea though, so it's gonna go above Squeeze, below Beyond the Sea. Finally, for season 1 is the ERLENMEYER FLASK, the season 1 finale. I have more notes for this episode than other episodes, but it's not a crazy amount yet. Just wait till we get to some of the later mythos, because with the mythos episodes, I feel like I need to go piece by piece a little more, because all of the information we get, how the information unfolds, how the episode is structured, how active of the episode it is, like, are the agents actually doing things, or does, like, bad stuff just happen to them and we just sit there and think, like, that sucks? All of this is important with the mythos episodes in a way that is just different in nature from the Monster of the Week episodes, so that's why I'm going a little bit more in depth. A tip from Deep Throat leads the agents to discover proof of genetic cloning of an alien virus. Testing of the material indicates presence of a third DNA base pair, something not present in life on Earth as we know it. So Scully has finally seen for herself proof of extraterrestrial life, potentially, or at least something undiscovered by science, which could change the way that we look at life on this planet. The doctor who aided Scully in this research is killed in an accident, but it's clearly government cover-up. Mulder finds bodies in tanks at a warehouse, and Scully finds a weird alien fetus thing in a container called the Erlenmeyer flask. And the bodies and tanks are removed from the warehouse that Mulder found. So Mulder is upset with Deep Throat for not leading them directly to the source sooner, because they might have had more time to find answers, but Deep Throat tells Mulder that he didn't think a cover-up would move so quickly. Mulder is kidnapped, and Deep Throat helps Scully negotiate a release for him. She is going to return the Erlenmeyer flask and its contents in exchange for Mulder. She doesn't know she can fully trust Deep Throat though, so she wants to do the exchange herself, but Deep Throat is there with her. Mulder is just like thrown out of a van, and they take the Erlenmeyer flask, and then they shoot Deep Throat and drive away, and Deep Throat's final words are, "Trust no one." And then the X-Files unit is shut down, and Mulder and Scully are reassigned. Compared to the other season 1 mythos episodes, I think this episode is pretty strong. The weak points come in when Deep Throat is not fully honest about information. There are these explanations to things that are going to become even more common as the series progresses. Things like, well, if you knew what I knew, everything would change, and the world can't know what I know, and I couldn't tell you all of that because they'll kill you. First of all, who? Second of all, what are you even talking about? Third of all, you know all this stuff. Fourth, what am I even going to do about it? Because clearly you already have a whole cover-up figured out. But as far as season 1 mythos goes, the episode's good. I don't think I can quite put it in the excellent tier, but I'm going to put it at the top of the solid tier. That's season 1. I don't see any reason we shouldn't just continue right along into season 2, so let's continue with the season 2 premiere, also a mythos episode. This one is titled Little Green Men. Since their separation and reassignment, Mulder and Scully have been meeting in secret. I love this era. Mulder is very frustrated with the closing of the X-Files, and he's starting to question his willingness to work for the Bureau at all anymore. Mulder visits an observatory in Puerto Rico where he believes there is evidence of transmission from aliens. Later, Scully has to go rescue him and help him escape from authorities who are after him for finding this information. For the very first time in the series, we actually see an alien, or like a traditional alien. I'm not convinced. So this is what the fun facts online say. I'm not convinced of this. I'm sorry, but you cannot tell me that we didn't see an alien in the pilot and we didn't see an alien in Erlenmeyer Flask. We also definitely saw a UFO in Deep Throat. And, like, not to be too Mulder-pilled, but, like, what else would those be? there's like an alien and a UFO nearby. It causes disturbance, and this other man who's sitting in the little observatory is terrified, and they don't speak the same language, so he just draws like the face of an alien on the wall. That's kind of fun and exciting. We also have Scully telling Mulder that him leaving the Bureau would be, quote, more than a professional loss. At the end of the episode, Mulder makes it out with a tape of the transmission, but it doesn't work anymore. It was destroyed in the electrical interference. And Mulder says, "I may not have the X-Files, but I still have my work. I still have you." Also, Scully has a key to Mulder's place, and she's trying to look for clues about where he may have gone because he just kind of disappears. There are people after him who are also after that information of where he went, and they're like, "Scully, what are you doing here?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm just feeding his pet fish. He gave me his key so I could feed his fish when he's away." So there's that, and then Mulder's facing a defeat and like questioning everything. Also, we get the introduction of Senator Matheson, who was kind of a new informant to Agent Mulder. He will be brought up a few more times, so I just kind of want to like flag his appearance in this episode. My favorite thing about this episode for sure is Mulder's personal journey and the changing relationship between Mulder and Scully. I think I'm going to put this right above the Erlenmeyer Flask. Our next Season 2 episode is The Host. This is a frightening Monster of the Week episode about a giant fluke worm. Despite their separation and reassignment, Mulder seeks help from Scully. We get to see Dr. Scully in action, which is very exciting to me personally. The agents also receive a tip with someone within the FBI, which indicates they must have an ally. This monster is horrifying, and this is a phenomenal episode. I am putting it at the top of the excellent tier. Next up, we have 3 episodes that make up the abduction arc. We are really getting into it now. A little bit of backstory. In the second half of Season 1, Gillian Anderson got married, and she found out she was pregnant. This meant that come early mid-Season 2, they had to find a way to write her out for a bit for maternity leave. So that's the context of why this came to be. Let's get into the first of these 3 episodes. This one is called DUANE Barry. An agent by the name of Alex Krycek brings Mulder in for help with negotiations in a hostage situation. The man claims to be an alien abductee who was experimented on. This leads Mulder to be pretty interested in the things that he has seen and experienced, but Scully discovers that the man is a former FBI agent and he left the Bureau a decade ago after being shot in the head, which may explain his delusions and paranoia. She warns Mulder that DUANE Barry is not what he seems and is just using these claims to get Mulder closer so he can do something to harm him. Eventually, however, DUANE Barry is detained and a medical workup is completed on him. During this, they find strange drillings in his back molars along with a metal implant. Beginning to suspect that the metal implant may have something to do with alien abduction, Scully calls Mulder with the news, but is interrupted by DUANE Barry breaking into her apartment and kidnapping her. When Mulder reaches Scully's apartment, the police are already there and Scully is gone. Fun fact about this episode is that Gillian Anderson's belly was too big to crawl across the floor in the kidnapping scene, and so they literally just had to drag her across the floor and try and make it look like she was crawling. This will not be the last time in the abduction arc when I say free her. We're going to rank DUANE Barry once we get through the 3 episodes. Next up is Ascension. Mulder attempts to locate and rescue Scully with the help of Alex Krycek. Barry wants to take Scully to a place he alluded to during the hostage situation, so after he's sighted on a certain route, Mulder knows exactly where she's being taken. CSM, remember that guy, cigarette smoking man, is also present through this episode, and we soon learn that Krycek is taking orders from him. And in a very high-stakes scene at the mountains, with a lift, Mulder is going towards the top of the mountain on a lift, and Krycek kills the man operating it and then stalls the lift. And Mulder climbs out, and I don't know what his plan is from here, but he just gets out of it because he has to save Scully. He will not lose another woman in his life to aliens. Then Krycek turns it back on. The thing starts moving. Mulder makes it up to the top of the mountain, but he is too late, and Scully is already gone. Her gold cross necklace that she famously wears is in DUANE Barry's trunk, and there's some blood. DUANE Barry says that he hopes they're not hurting her too much with the experiments, and we see, indeed, that Scully is being experimented on. One such experiment is this belly inflation thing, where we get a glimpse of Gillian Anderson's actual pregnant belly. Once again, free her. Mulder finds evidence that Krychek is a double agent, and he also presents Skinner with the metal implant and the explanation that he thinks some sort of cover-up with the metal implant was the reason Scully was kidnapped, and this leaves them only one thing left to do, which is reopen the X-Files. The third and final episode of the abduction arc is One Breath. Scully is returned. She just appears at a hospital, and Mulder rushes there to try and figure out where she was, who brought her there, what condition she's in. There's absolutely no information about where she was or who brought her in, though, and she is in a coma. Mulder has some help from the lone gunman, his 3 buddies. We learn that Scully is in very bad condition. Extra DNA in her system, essentially waste DNA from some kind of genetic experiment, and it will probably kill her. We are also introduced to Melissa Scully, who is the sister of Dana. She is a cool spiritual lesbian to me. She says that Dana is currently trying to decide whether to stay or to move on. And so there's a couple different shots we get. Gillian Anderson is mostly in the hospital bed in this episode because she came to set to film this 10 days after having a baby. Her body is definitely postpartum, and you can tell, and there is no reason they couldn't have just given her a fucking blanket. Give her a fucking blanket. As Scully's condition worsens, Melissa and Margaret, her mother, tell Mulder that Scully already has paperwork in place stating that she doesn't want to be kept in a coma. Someone steals Scully's blood sample from the hospital, and Mulder chases after him, and then X shoots the thief in the head and scolds Mulder for getting involved like this. He says it's for the best if he just mourns Scully and then move on. Mulder receives a tip about CSM's location, and so he goes to find CSM. He considers shooting CSM in the head. He asks him why it was Scully and not him who was taken, and CSM says that if Mulder kills him, then he will never know the truth. So in his frustration, Mulder writes a letter of resignation, but Skinner speaks with him a bit, and we learn that it was Skinner who gave Mulder CSM's location. X warns Mulder of a planned break-in in his apartment, and Melissa goes to Mulder's that night to say she's disappointed that he's not coming to say goodbye. One of her lines here is, "Why is it so much easier for you running around trying to get even than just expressing to her how you feel?" She says that Dana deserves better than that, so Mulder decides to go see her at the hospital. When he gets home later that night, his place was indeed broken into, and in the morning he gets a call that Scully is awake. She remembers absolutely nothing from when she was gone, but Mulder returns her cross necklace to her. The mystery surrounding where Scully has been and her recovery is fine. The grappling with Faith and Scully trying to decide whether to stay or move on is good. One of the most infuriating mythos scenes of the first few seasons is in this episode, and it's the scene between X and Mulder because, of course, X, who, by the way, is Mulder's new informant. I don't know if I've established that yet. He says, quote, "If people were to know what I know, everything would fall apart," end quote. And other shit about, the game. And it just takes away any agency from Mulder in a way that's detrimental to the story itself. It's not a bad thing that there's conflict, but the way that's clearly becoming a pattern doesn't give Mulder much to actually do. And right now, we just want answers. Why was Scully taken? Where was she taken? We're not trying to hash out the entire state of the American government and their conspiracies. There's only a few things we want answers about, and we can't even get that. And, whether or not we ever really, truly get satisfying answers to that make any sense at all, questionable. Those are the 3 episodes that immediately deal with Dana Scully's abduction. However, Scully being abducted was the single most important decision made in all of the mythology arc, and it will go on to influence, I would say, 70% of what is to come in the mythology arc. I think DUANE, Barry, and Ascension are both very strong episodes, and I think One Breath wastes a lot of time because they weren't really sure how to get back into a status quo after having something so horrible happen to one of their 2 main characters. It seems like they hadn't yet decided what they actually wanted the abduction to mean. They just knew something shocking had to happen to her because God forbid she just miss 1, maybe 2 episodes. God forbid they give her more than 10 days. Anyway, I think for now I'm going to put Ascension above DUANE Barry. I think I'm going to put them both above TOOMS and Squeeze. It's hard to rank Mythos episodes because most of them I would not necessarily choose to rewatch in the same way I would choose a Monster of the Week. But since the first 2 episodes in the abduction arc are some of the better Mythos episodes, I feel like I have to put them a little bit high. And then One Breath, I hate this episode. So this is going, and oh boy, right above E.B.E. Okay, with the abduction arc out of the way, let's get back to fun, silly monsters with Season 2, Episode 9, Firewalker. An exploration of a volcano exposes a group of scientists to an unknown parasite. The guilt-ridden head of the project, played by Bradley Whitford, knows the public can't be exposed to the parasite or its spores. He's hiding out in the caves, and it's also Scully's first case post-abduction, so Mulder is particularly protective of her. The deaths in this episode are gnarly. If you're infected with this thing's spores, it will incubate within your body and then, upon maturing, burst out of your throat. It's similar to like a chest burster from Alien, except it comes from the throat instead. There is a graduate student who is working under Bradley Whitford's character. He's her research advisor, and unfortunately she too is infected and dies in Scully's presence, but Scully manages to push her into a quarantine room just in time. Mulder calls for the evacuation and quarantine procedures for the two of them, and although Daniel Kripkos, the head of the project, is still alive, it becomes clear that he's not interested in leaving, and he would rather go back into the caves and die. He feels great guilt for the death of his student, and he takes her body back down into the caves with him. The research site is shut down. I love that although it's a creepy monster, there is still a good amount of time to explore Daniel and his state of mind, as the project has begun to cost the lives of the people on his team. This being Scully's first case back is also pretty notable because it's very likely that Mulder shares a similar guilt to that of Daniel's, although Scully obviously is not his student and they are equals as partners on the X-Files. I, for whatever reason, love this episode. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and it may just seem like a random ass Monster of the Week episode, but for me it just hits all the right notes, and I'm putting this episode in the God tier right above Darkness Falls. I just love this episode. When I first watched the series, it didn't particularly stand out to me, but then upon rewatching, I was like, wait, Firewalker's like kind of that bitch. Next up, we have Red Museum. The agents investigate the kidnapping of a teenage boy who reappears with, quote, "He is one," written on him. Suspicions initially fall on the local church called the Red Museum, who are a vegan organization that may have wished to punish the child of a worker at the meatpacking plant. The agents uncover a conspiracy in which a local doctor inoculated children with bovine growth hormones. Now, to cover their trail, these kids are targets of an assassin. A local farmer is killed, and Scully thinks she may recognize the man. It later dawns on her that the man is Deep Throat's killer. With this assassin out there, the children are brought to the Red Museum to be held collectively for safety. Tests show that an unknown substance related to the inoculations matches that of the Erlenmeyer flask, the DNA that Scully found in the Season 1 finale. Mulder wants to catch Deep Throat's killer alive in order to get justice for Deep Throat as well as uncover more information about the conspiracy, but because this man also killed the local sheriff's son in his pursuits, the sheriff kills him as soon as they see him, and the case remains open and unsolved. Going into my rewatch, I knew that this was kind of a Mythos episode, kind of a Monster of the Week episode, but I couldn't remember how the mythos was connected, so I was pleasantly surprised, and I think the reason I enjoy this episode where I may not enjoy other episodes where everything is just explained away with, oh, there's a medical experiment, is because this directly connects it to the Erlenmeyer flask. It directly connects it to one of the most thrilling moments from Season 1, and it seems like maybe they actually do want to connect pieces together. How exciting is that? The presence of the church in town is fascinating the whole way through because it feels like it might be an X-Files episode that's about a small town cult, and there's many of those, but this one kind of spins it on its head a bit, which I think is cool. I am going to go ahead and put this episode in the excellent tier, but I'm going to put it below TOOMS and Squeeze. Although I love that it connects to the Erlenmeyer flask, is it weird that it's rated above the Erlenmeyer flask? This, to me, is an episode that doesn't just add unnecessary stuff. It uses things it has already presented to us, and therefore I think it's okay that I like it a little bit more. Next up is Excelsis Day. There are attacks at a convalescent homes, shrooms, and angry ghosts. The agents are present for this case because they go to investigate the sexual assault of a nurse by an invisible entity. Mulder almost drowns at one point when he's trapped in a room with a ghost or a ghost-like entity. It's a terrible episode, and they do not really handle the subject matter at hand very well. This, without a doubt, is just going straight into the bottom tier. There's also some weird stuff with the way that Eastern medicine is used and discussed in the episode. Yeah, this is gonna go beneath Fallen Angel and FBI's Most Unwanted. Next up, we have Irresistible. A death fetishist case deeply affects Scully, but she continues to pursue the case because she doesn't want Mulder to need to take care of her. Scully also does not like being vulnerable. Knowing the agents are on his trail, the killer makes Scully his next target, and Mulder arrives with help just in time. This episode has some high points, such as Scully in therapy, thank God, because girl needs it after what she's gone through. This is the first time we really are seeing Scully dealing with the trauma from her abduction. It's a whole episode about bodily autonomy and different ways that is torn away from you. I appreciate that when it comes to Scully being sensitive about the case, it's not just like, oh, she's a woman, therefore seeing a case about violence against women is too difficult for her. It's never about that. Scully will go on to work on other similar cases in the future. She is connecting with a specific type of vulnerability, having just gone through this abduction and the loss of her own autonomy, and not knowing what happened to her body during that time. This episode, coming right off the back of the previous episode, is kind of wild, but I can't hold that against this episode. Episode also ends with Scully breaking down into tears. I think it's only the second time she's ever cried in the series. She has a vulnerable moment with Mulder, and he holds her, and it's very sweet. I love this for the sake of Mulder and Scully's relationship, but also just Scully, who is usually very quiet about her emotions, reaching a breaking point. I think I love this episode because it's so active. We aren't just being told about bad things that happen to Scully. Instead, she is fighting against it and trying to find hope for her future. That's what makes it interesting. I am going to put Irresistible at the top of the excellent tier, followed by The Host, and then Beyond the Sea. Our next episode is Die Hand die Verletzt. This is a satanic panic-inspired episode where the agents investigate a murder with ritualistic elements in a town with heavy rumors of cult activity. The cult actually turns out to be a parent-teacher group who has kind of been lacking on cult activity lately. The daughter of one of the members of the cult tells the agents about some repressed memories which have started to come back since the death of one of her classmates. It's a very disturbing scene where she recounts horrific abuse. The long story short is she recalls being sexually assaulted by the cult, her younger sister being killed, being forced to give birth to babies who are then killed by the cult. Disturbing as but the performance is incredible. In the end, the father of this girl is killed and eaten by a snake, and the snake is actually being controlled by the substitute teacher from the school, who is actually the devil or a devil-like entity who has come to punish the cult for being less than loyal recently. The one thing about the girl's monologue is that it's far scarier than anything we actually see in the episode, but that's also kind of the point. And also, like, I'm glad those things didn't happen. Me speaking to the strength of their particular scene, I think highlights how successfully they actually implemented their idea into an episode. Another note on this episode is how gorgeous the cinematography and lighting is. The production design and lighting is honestly gorgeous throughout all of the X-Files. Like, you can be watching the X-Files episode, but damn, it looks good. This is a particular episode that stands out to me when I think about the aesthetics, particularly the scene where the agents are in the woods. The sky is this beautiful color blue behind them, and they have umbrellas. Scully is beautifully styled, and in fact, I love this scene and Scully's look here so much that it's actually my profile picture on chess.com. And just like that, we are back to Mythos episodes. Okay, so we've got a two-parter. Buckle up for this one. This is Colony, followed by Endgame. The agents investigate a shape-shifting alien bounty hunter who has been murdering doctors. There's green goo that eats through stuff. This is important. Whenever these doctors are killed, they kind of dissolve into this gross green goo that is like I don't know if it's super acidic or something, but it eats through things and can like really harm you or like make you lose your sight if it's too close to your eyes and stuff like that. Samantha, Mulder's sister, appears. She tells him a man is hunting her adoptive father, who is an alien. And there is a cliffhanger for this episode where Scully is approached by the shape-shifting alien bounty hunter disguised as Mulder. Biggest thing to deal with here is that Samantha, who is now a grown woman, is back. She is reappeared. She's alive and well. That's a lot that's like huge on its own, right? And now Scully's in danger. So we go on to Endgame. Mulder trades Samantha for Scully's freedom. The plan, however, though, is to get to the exchange and then kill the shape-shifting alien bounty hunter so that both of the women are free. Unfortunately, when the hunter is sniped, he pulls Samantha off this tall bridge into the water with him, and she is not seen again. So Mulder has to go back and tell his father that once again he has lost Samantha. Later, Scully tells Mulder that she has helped recover Samantha's body from the water, and her body turns to green goo. At a lab that Mulder goes to investigate, there are more Samanthas. It was all a lie, and they tricked Mulder so he would help them. The Samantha he had been speaking to was just one of these alien hybrid clones. Mulder speaks to X about finding where the bounty hunter went, and he chases him all the way to Alaska. He is hospitalized and freezing as and despite Mulder telling Scully he needs to do this alone and she should not put herself in any more danger when Scully gets to Alaska, because of course she goes to help him. But it's a good thing that he's freezing because the cold is preventing this alien virus he has contracted from fully infecting him and killing him. So she saves Mulder's life, and when he wakes up, he says that although he has no Samantha and no hard proof of extraterrestrials, he does have the faith to keep on looking. Colony, not a bad episode. I'm gonna put it in fine under fire. Endgame, bad episode. This episode is going at the bottom of FBI's Most Unwanted. I'm sorry, I can't. I said once before that many of our problems were introduced in Deep Throat, and then I said many of our problems were introduced in one breath. But Colony and Endgame? Let's talk about the mystery junk drawer again, shall we? So, from the first 2 episodes of the show, we established abductions, human experimentation, time-lost metallic implants, destroying evidence by fire or force, experimental spacecraft, military cover-ups, recovery of E.B.E.s, locking evidence in the Pentagon, which indicates inside jobs, informants who know everything but won't say it. That's the problem I'm really speaking about with Deep Throat and the episode E.B.E. and the episode One Breath. Now we have this green goo, a shape-shifting alien bounty hunter, Samantha clones, and, in general, human-alien hybrid clones. They were doing too much. They were pitching ideas, and they said okay to all of them. Surely things will get better moving forward. Next, we have an episode called Fearful Symmetry. An invisible elephant is implicated in the death of a man in this episode, which features the seemingly immaculate conception of an elephant and also a tiger, as well as a gorilla named Sophie who disappears in a flash of light. I think this episode's supposed to be a commentary on, like, the man-eat-man idea, but at the end of the day, it really sets itself apart as being a truly awful X-Files episode. I mean, Scully doing an autopsy on an elephant, like, that's that's television history, but congratulations to Endgame for being the second to worst episode on the tier list. KALM. Mulder and Scully investigate a ship off the coast of Norway whose entire crew has perished after rapidly aging. I have not seen that movie with like the beach that makes you turn old or whatever, but this is like a little place in the sea that makes you turn old. Yeah, so they also turn old and almost die, and I was like, okay, it's just some like weird unexplained phenomena, like the Bermuda Triangle, where time is all fucked up, and it might be like a major discovery or breakthrough for Scully, whose undergrad degree is in physics, right? They go the extra mile on the X-Files and explain it away with radiation. There are a lot of X-Files which are just explained by radiation, but many times they just didn't really need to throw that into the episode. The host is explained away by radiation. In Darkness Falls, the bugs are explained away by radiation. There's like a whole variety of episodes where this is the case. Even the episode Ice, which is currently at the very top of my tier, has a silly explanation in there at the end. Mulder thinks the reason this parasite was so deep in the ice is because a meteorite or something hit the Earth and it brought it with it. Instead of like, I don't know. There were some crazy ass things that lived millions of years ago. I was willing just to buy that there was a weird bug in the ice. You didn't need to bring outer space into it. Before anyone comes at me saying, well, the show is about outer space and aliens. Unfortunately, most of the Mythos episodes would beg to differ, because as we get more and more convoluted with the government cover-ups, it strays further and further from aliens' light. Anyways, back on topic. Anyways, Scully does her best to monitor her and Mulder's health as much as she possibly can, but water is running low, and they really need rescue as soon as possible. The wrinkly Scully and Mulder are rescued just hours from death, and after some time to recover in the hospital, they return to their regular health. This is an episode that I really enjoy. I'm gonna put it right beneath Die Hand, die Verletzt. I love the setting of the episode. I love an episode that is set at sea. The special effects makeup that Scully and Mulder have is awesome. I can't imagine what a nightmare this episode was to film. Yeah, maybe the whole premise is a little bit silly, but I'm not against silly if it still creates exciting stakes and an episode structure that complements the show. Next episode is called Humbug. This is considered to be the first comedy episode of The X-Files. The X-Files, especially as the series goes on, really experiments with different genres within itself, which is awesome, and something that these long seasons of TV allowed writers and showrunners to do. In this episode, the agents investigate a murder in a town built by circus and sideshow performers. We see lots of these performers throughout the episode. It results in a pretty delightful cast. Through meeting all of these interesting characters and potential suspects, we explore what it means to be different. We also uncover the true killer, which is, for lack of better words, the fleshy blob of a fetal twin, which detaches from his fully developed, now adult man twin to commit murders. And in the end, the blob is eaten by a man known at these sideshows as the man who eats everything. My favorite moments from this episode are Scully in a house of mirrors, this shot of Mulder who slides out of this room and meets Scully in the hallway. It's just a really fun shot. And then a line where one of the men from the town tells Scully, "Imagine going through your whole life looking like that." Points over and the camera pans to Mulder, who's just standing there with his stupid ass tie. He's just such a silly goose. I love Fox Mulder. Oh, also Scully eats a live cricket in the episode, so that's kind of fun. It's something different. I think this episode is solid. I'm gonna put it below Little Green Men and Erlenmeyer FLASK, but above the pilot. Next, we have Our Town, where a cannibalistic cult is uncovered in a small town following the death of a woman at the poultry plant. The town is plagued by a rare disease, which can be spread by eating those with the disease. Scully gives the full scientific explanation of it, but long story short is it's because of the way it affects the proteins. So if you ingest it, it can also affect your DNA. This episode is actually a take on a real-life story with a real-life cannibalistic cult. While investigating, Scully is kidnapped by the cult and she's almost beheaded, but luckily Mulder saves her in time. This is a banger episode of The X-Files. There's lots of disgusting visuals. If I were ranking solely based on the procedural elements of episodes, I would say this episode definitely comes top 10. But for this tier list purposes, it's going to go in the excellent tier. And I think I want to put it above Ascension. Much more likely to rewatch this episode than I am to watch the abduction arc. We are on to the season 2 finale, which means we have another Mythos episode. This is called ANASAZI. Mulder receives a top secret drive which contains government secrets about the existence of extraterrestrials. Receiving this drive puts his life in immediate danger. A group of powerful men at the top of the government, who, for the purposes of the X-Files lore, are known as the Syndicate. The Syndicate are concerned about what happens if the information in the drive gets out. But Cigarette Smoking Man, CSM, assures them that he has it under control. He does not. Their writing is encrypted. Scully discovers that it appears to be written in Navajo. An initial translation of the documents suggests the document is about the transportation of goods and of vaccinations. CSM visits Mulder's father. They know one another. This is like a smoking gun. This is a big deal, right? Because now this man who has been against Mulder and Scully all this time, who played the key role in her getting abducted, presumably because Krychek was working with him and Krychek allowed her to get abducted. You know what I'm saying. How does he know Mulder's father? Anyways, Mulder's father asks Mulder to come over, and he starts to talk a little bit. It seems like he wants to confess something, but then he steps into the bathroom, and Krychek is waiting there, and he kills him. Scully knows Mulder will get framed for the killing, so she gets him to sleep in her bed that night, just to like keep him there, keep him safe, make sure he doesn't do anything irrational. Scully also discovers that Mulder is getting pretty sick, and it's because his water tank was poisoned. Mulder is going to shoot Krychek, but Scully shoots Mulder in the shoulder first to stop him from shooting Krychek, because, again, she's worried that Mulder will be framed for the murder of his father, and if the man who really did it is dead, he's When Mulder wakes up, they are on the Navajo reservation in New Mexico. Scully tells Mulder that she has had the files translated by a man who assists them in New Mexico. His name is Albert, and she tells Mulder her name is in the top secret files and she wants him to find out why. CSM calls Mulder and tells him not to take everything his father says at face value. He uses the call to track Mulder's cell phone and finds him at the site of an artifact near the reservation. This is a train filled with bodies seemingly used for experimentation. One body has a smallpox vaccine scar, which indicates to Scully that these experiments were done, somewhat recently, and it just means that it's like all closer to them than they had ever suspected before. CSM reaches the train car with the army, and Mulder is nowhere to be seen in it, so CSM orders the men to burn the car, thus destroying all of the evidence. And we are left on a cliffhanger, wondering whether or not Mulder is killed in this fire. Overall, I think this is one of the best Mythos episodes in the entire series. I will share my one complaint because this is a video meant for discussion. If Mr. Mulder knows so much about Samantha's abduction, why did he react the way that he did throughout Colony and Endgame? Like, the man can still feel remorse for things that happened that maybe he had some small part in, and we do know that he kind of treated Mulder like shit most of his life, but as we layer more onto the story here and later in the series, previous Mythos episodes just become weaker and weaker. I'm gonna put ANASAZI above Ascension. I don't think I can bring myself to put it above those Monster of the Weeks that are just like the best of the best, but I can definitely put it above Ascension. We are already diving into Season 3 now with the Season 3 premiere, The Blessing Way. The Syndicate continues to search for Mulder, as well as the secret information that he was holding on to, and Scully attends Mr. Mulder's funeral. A member of the Syndicate at the funeral approaches Scully and warns her that her life is in danger because of her connection to Mulder and potentially the top secret file. He tells her that this killer could be anyone she knows, that she shouldn't trust anybody in her life. Scully is alarmed when, upon returning home, she sees Skinner leaving her apartment. He is the assistant director who Mulder and Scully report to. She later asks him about it, and he says that he had gone by to just talk to her about something. So now she's beginning to wonder if Skinner may be the hitman out to get her. Mulder is discovered on the brink of death, hiding in the desert. He is nursed back to health by the Navajo, particularly by the man named Albert, and Scully becomes anxious for answers when she discovers a metal chip implanted in the back of her neck. Once Mulder is well enough to travel home, he immediately seeks out his mother, hoping she can explain her father's affiliation with CSM. Scully tells Melissa about the chip she found in her neck, and Melissa is extremely worried about her. There's still a lot of elements with the abduction that Scully has not properly dealt with, and as her sister, Melissa tells Scully how important it is to find the answers. Melissa goes over to Scully's again to see her, and as soon as she steps into the apartment, she is shot in the head by Alex Krychek, who thought it was Scully walking through the door. Scully is brought to the hospital in critical condition, but as of the end of the episode, she is still alive, and therefore this episode will not be rated poorly because of the, spoiler alert, demise of Melissa Scully. I have lots to say about that. We'll get to it with the next episode, but I just want to note that although Melissa gets shot, I'm not going to hold that against this episode. That's what the next episode is for. Scully reaches Mulder's apartment and Skinner is already there, and they pull their guns on each other. So dramatic. This episode is also great. I am going to put this episode right beneath ANASAZI. I'm gonna have a lot to say about the next episode, so I want to address some of the Melissa stuff now. We learn that Melissa passes away at the end of the following episode, and I just want to state, I truly believe that killing off Melissa Scully is one of the 3 biggest mistakes this show ever makes. Because somebody besides Mulder pushing Scully for answers feels so necessary for Scully's autonomy and well-being and the balance of her work life and her personal life. But also having someone who is sort of a spiritual guide, it could have been so powerful moving into the later seasons of the show. I don't believe killing Melissa Scully off was necessary to establish the stakes, because Mulder's father was literally killed 1 episode ago. Her being shot, fine. I think that works because this episode, and as we move into the next episode called Paperclip, we learn that Mulder was the one who was supposed to be abducted, but Samantha was chosen to go in his place. So now Scully being the target and Melissa going in her place, damn. I can't decide if this revelation hurts or helps the one breath scene where Mulder asks CSM why it was Scully and not him. We are sort of given an explanation in an episode in a season quite a ways in the future. Like, don't worry, kitten. But I kind of find it to be a flimsy explanation, so I'm not gonna get too ahead of myself on that. And finally, on the Melissa Scully thing, the reason they killed her off. Let's talk about that. Basically, the actress who plays Melissa booked a pilot, and so she was going to be on another show. But the pilot ended up not even getting picked up, so they killed her for nothing. To try and end this conversation on a slightly sillier note, at the time, that actor was dating the actor who plays Alex Krycek, which I just think is really funny. The cast was just going wild. And for legal purposes, that's probably all I'll be saying about cast relationships. Now we can discuss Paperclip. And I have lots of notes for this one. Mulder and Scully are reunited, and they continue to search for answers about Mr. Mulder's involvement in a secret government project. Word project, man. It's gonna make me want to do something absolutely drastic by the time we get to season 5. So there was an operation called Paperclip, which gave Nazis safe haven in exchange for secret medical research. Scully is unable to go to the hospital to see Melissa due to them still being hunted. And in New York, the syndicate are distressed that an innocent woman, Melissa, was shot. The man who warned Scully ahead of time about the danger is present at the meeting, so this is when we learn that it's a member of the syndicate who warned Scully. CSM tells the syndicate that the mistake will be rectified, and all of the men want to see the secret drive, but of course CSM doesn't have it. One thing I really like about ANASAZI, The Blessing Way, and a bit in Paperclip is that we actually get to see CSM as weak, instead of just this like all-knowing power who can never die, like he's William Afton. It makes the episode so much more exciting. Mulder and Scully find top-secret medical files on millions of Americans. One folder is marked as Fox Mulder, but the Fox is covered up and Samantha is written on it instead. There's also a folder for Dana Scully. Government agents begin to close in on them, but they manage to escape, and they tell Skinner a bit about what's going on. CSM confronts Skinner about the tape, but Skinner plays dumb and pretends he doesn't have it and doesn't know where it is. CSM keeps his promise about retaliating on the man who put Melissa's life in jeopardy, and he bombs Krycek's car, but Krycek manages to escape before it blows up. The new informant within the episode, named Kemper, a man who knew Mulder's father, says that they tried to create alien-human hybrids, and that DNA to do this was extracted from millions of Americans during smallpox vaccinations. He claims they took Samantha as insurance on the project so Mr. Mulder would keep his mouth shut. Scully, however, believes they're just telling them what they want to hear, what they expect to hear. So Mulder goes to his mother in the middle of the damn night to ask if his father ever made her make a choice. She says no, that she couldn't choose, so his father chose instead. So that, allegedly, is the reason Samantha was taken and not box. Skinner finally tells CSM he does have the tape, and it gives him some leverage to negotiate with him. Additionally, for Skinner's protection and for the protection of Albert, who translated the documents, 20 others who also know and can translate Navajo have also been told about the contents of the files, just in case anything should happen to them. Melissa dies at the hospital. Scully says there is no justice. Mulder says he believes more than ever that the truth is close. Scully says she knows the truth, but what she wants now is answers. So we're back to the project, and if you knew what I knew, then your life would be dangerous. I can't stand this type of episode or this type of plot. This episode makes me so mad. I'm putting this episode at the very bottom of the list. Congrats to Fearful Symmetry. You are now an elite employee at only the second worst episode of the X-Files. It's a new day. Let's keep on going. Next up, we have Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. This is another comedy episode. In this episode, a psychic becomes a suspect in a series of killings that target fortune tellers and other psychics. The opening to the investigation is pretty funny, with Mulder not being the weird one. Instead, they have this other psychic come in, and he says that somebody in the room is a skeptic, and therefore he can't work in their presence. And we're like, oh, that's Scully. She's always a skeptic, but it's actually Mulder who thinks this guy is fake. It's a fun episode overall, although I don't think it quite aligns with my sense of humor. This episode also introduces one of the most important characters of the series, whose name is Queequeg. Queequeg is a dog that lives in the apartment building, and when the owner dies, he starts eating the owner. And anyways, Queequeg is left to Scully in the end, so now Scully has a pet dog named Queequeg. I don't think I've really mentioned it, but her dad used to read Moby Dick to her as a kid, and so her nickname from him was Starbuck, and she called him Ahab. That's like Scully lore 101. Our main character allegedly knows how people are gonna die. He alludes to Mulder that he's gonna die via autoerotic asphyxiation. Sure, what the hell? And when Scully asks about how she dies, he says you don't. Maybe it's kind of shadowing like there's gonna be some weird things to her where she's on the brink of death in the future but then doesn't die. I don't know. I think it's also possible that he was seeing her in purgatory like we saw in the episode One Breath, and she came back from that, so that's kind of like clouding what he can see. I don't know. Anyways, there's a situation with a pie. Really loved this episode, and it really stood out to me my first watch through of the X-Files. But I think my preferences have sort of changed since then, so while this would have been probably in the God tier my first watch through, it's gonna go either an excellent or solid. I kind of think I'm gonna put it at the top of the solid tier. And in fairness, I would rather watch this episode than most of the Mythos episodes I put in the excellent tier, but there's more to a good episode than rewatchability. I'm trying to tell myself that, because otherwise all of the Mythos episodes are just gonna be flops, and I'm trying to be a little more patient with the Mythos. See how long that lasts, because boy, do we have some doozies in just a few episodes. Next up is Too Shy. In this episode, a man pursues overweight women online for dates, only to kill them and then suck out all of their fat. He also spits a nasty digestive enzyme on them before he eats them, and ultimately Scully and an almost victim end up alone with the killer, and he attacks Scully, and the other woman shoots and kills him. It's such a slay. It's a very creepy episode. The investigation is cool. This man isn't just a regular man who terrorizes women and kills them. This man does it because he needs their body's lipids. It's a good episode. I'm putting it in fine. I'm gonna put it at the top of fine, just above fire. Next up is OUIBLIETTE. A woman named Lucy survived being kidnapped and held hostage as a child. And now she has this weird psychic, but also beyond psychic connection to Amy, a new victim of the same kidnapper. For example, when Amy is kidnapped and her nose is bleeding, Lucy's nose starts bleeding. And blood work shows that the blood on Lucy is actually Amy's blood, despite the fact the two of them have never met before. Mulder tries to work with Lucy to get whatever kind of memories she has access to, or these newly forming memories, which are actually what Amy's seen, in order to find Amy and rescue her. Of course, this is traumatizing Lucy all over again. It's already taken her long enough to sort of recover from what happened to her. In fact, she is still very much struggling in her day-to-day life because of the trauma. When they eventually manage to track the kidnapper and Amy down, he brings Amy out into the river where he plans to drown her, and Lucy knows right away that Amy is in water. Scully rushes out to try and find Amy and the kidnapper in the water. Lucy begins drowning in Agent Mulder's presence. However, she is very much not in the water. Again, her body is reacting to the situation that Amy is in. Amy is essentially on death's door when she's recovered from the water, truly having been held under the water to drown. but Lucy ends up drowning and dying in her place, and Amy makes the recovery. This episode is so sad. As far as the agents go, this episode is particularly meaningful to Mulder because anytime a young woman goes missing or is kidnapped or taken, it's a case that Mulder tends to take kind of personally because of his sister. And then, of course, the character of Lucy, who is such a tragic character, and she's trying so hard to live a normal life, and then this happens. The kidnapper is detained and will never be able to do this again, but unfortunately Lucy loses her life. Amy survives, but we can't help but wonder what her future will look like after seeing Lucy's. Yeah, just a very thought-provoking episode about, among other things, the way that trauma lives within the body and informs our experiences. I'm gonna put it at the bottom of the excellent tier for now, but I just think it deserves its place there. I'm just partial to this episode for one reason or another. And with that, we move on to more mythos. Yay! This season's mid-season two-parter is Nisei and 731, which to me are two of the absolute worst mythos episodes we ever have. These two episodes require a fair amount of notes, so bear with me here. Mulder buys a tape of an alleged alien autopsy off of some guy in a catalog, a likely thing for him to do. Some guy pulled it off a satellite from a train car. Anyways, the agents go to investigate this man and how exactly he got this footage and what the footage is really of, but they discover the man is dead. Within his belongings, they locate the name of a woman named Betsy, and Scully goes to question her. At Betsy's house, a group of women are present, and they all seem to know Scully. They tell Scully they were also victims of abduction, that they were experimented on, and that their memories have slowly started to come back to them after time. Scully tells them she is not ready to discuss that area of her life yet, but they point out to Scully that she has the mark, the implant, in the back of her neck, which Scully discovered earlier on in the season. The women also tell Scully that Betsy is dying from cancer caused by something unknown. Meanwhile, a briefcase stolen by Mulder and Scully earlier on in the investigation turns out to have belonged to a Japanese diplomat, and this diplomat never returned home. Skinner warns Mulder that the man was targeted for his briefcase, which Scully now has, which means Scully's life is now in danger. Likely thing for it to be. And Mulder decides to visit his senator friend, Senator Matheson, who gives Mulder the name of 4 doctors who were murdered while pursuing some kind of top secret project. Mulder decides to track down the train where some of the secret project was being done, including the alleged alien autopsy. Meanwhile, Scully rewatches this so-called alien autopsy tape, and she recognizes one of the doctors in the video. It is one of the men who performed experiments on her. X warns Scully that Mulder cannot get on that train. Mulder doesn't listen and boards it anyway. And I can't lie, Mulder boarding the train is a little bit exciting, but this two-parter only stays exciting for so long. Let's just dive right into part 2. Which is 731. This episode opens with the military raiding a leprosy research compound, executing almost everyone. Just a few people manage to escape, and they hide all of the bodies in a mass grave. Then X tells Scully that if she wants answers about why she knows the man and what happened when she was abducted, she should focus on what it is they put in her neck. Okay, this was kind of something that she was supposed to figure out back before Melissa died, but, things get put off because of the nature of the way the series is formatted, so, sure. Scully learns that these chips were sent to a doctor. This doctor is killed on the train that Mulder is on. Scully doesn't know this, though, and she continues to search for the doctor, which leads her to find the mass grave from the beginning of the episode. A helicopter approaches, so she has to run. Back on the train's conductor, who claims to work for the NSA, informs Mulder that there is a bomb on board the train. Back in West Virginia, a man tells Scully that the greatest country is no longer measured by bravest soldiers, but greatest scientists. The man who's talking to Scully and giving her all this information about the research calls Mulder to warn him that all of this isn't what he thinks it is. There are no aliens here. Those were just doctors with this project performing research on people. There's no aliens. These are just people with leprosy. So Scully, it would seem, was not experimented on by aliens, to be totally clear about what this episode tells us. She was experimented on by a group of doctors who come from Japan, who are in the United States and being protected by the United States government. Sure, what the hell. These doctors are apparently working on a secret project, or continuing to work on a secret project that actually really did exist in real life in the 30s and 40s. Anyway, I say, the bomb is armed now. And Mulder thinks the thing he saw is a human-alien hybrid, which makes sense because we did see alleged alien-human hybrids in the episode Colony. Why do we have a shape-shifting alien bounty hunter if he's just a guy? Let's not get too ahead or behind ourselves. X manages to save Mulder from the train, carrying him off just before the whole thing detonates. The briefcase they have turns out to have absolutely no useful information. The information in it seems to have been replaced with fake, useless information. And Scully suspects that Mulder is actually somehow doing the government's work for them. He's chasing aliens that only exist to hide bigger secrets. Like aliens, as we sort of know it or think we know it, only exist as like a cover-up or like an apology for the bigger atrocities committed by the government. Anyway, we end on a shot of CSM and we see that the real journal is being translated for him. I hate these episodes. I'm gonna put Nisei above E.B.E. and HUBUG, and I'm gonna put 731 at the very bottom of FBI's Most Unwanted. Next up, we have War of the Coprophages. This is a comedy episode about cockroach attacks, but the cockroaches are actually like teeny tiny robotic cockroaches, not real cockroaches. For most of the episode, Scully is at home taking care of Queequeg and just like enjoying her night off. She's reading a book, she's giving Queequeg a bath, she's on her pewter. I love the few times we get to see Scully just at home minding her business, but Mulder keeps calling her, and every single time he calls her to tell her something new about the case, she explains it away with science, which obviously is something Scully does a lot throughout the series, but getting to see that like it's a conversation she enjoys having, and he can call her anytime and she'll give him an answer in like 30 seconds. It's so sweet, and yay, Queequeg! This is Queequeg's second appearance. I love him so much. I really, really, really need to get a little Pomeranian plushie so I can have my own Queequeg. Please subscribe, like, and comment so I can get the monetization money to buy a cute little Pomeranian. I need to bring Queequeg home. While Mulder is investigating, he also meets this woman whose name is Bambi, Dr. Bambi Barenbaum, and I love Bambi. I wish she was in more episodes. She works for the Department of Agriculture. Okay, it just like lit up where we could have used Bambi more. We could have used Bambi so easily in some of the upcoming plots. I'm mad now. Anyway, Bambi is a gorgeous, intelligent woman who Mulder flirts a little bit with, and she flirts a little bit with him. She's honestly just like really into science, you know, she's really into bugs. And she is so cool. She is the icon. She is the moment. Scully ultimately may be getting just a little bit jealous, so she decides to go help Mulder in person on this investigation. Also, like, the case is escalating. Mulder clearly needs more help, so it's not only that she's jealous, but myself and many viewers of the show are like, yeah, like, Scully is definitely getting a little bit jealous here. She needs to go. There's plenty of stuff in this episode that, like, doesn't completely make sense, or it doesn't really go anywhere, but I don't really give a fuck. It's a fun episode. In fact, it's a God tier episode. Where in the God tier should it go? I'm thinking either right above Firewalker or right below Firewalker. Either way, it's in the God tier. Like, this is a great place to be. You know what? For now, I'm gonna put it right beneath Firewalker, but I'm sure the God tier in particular will get kind of reordered later on, so we'll figure it out later. Next up is Grotesque. In this episode, a serial killer claims to be possessed by a gargoyle. Mulder also reconnects with an old mentor on this case, which provides an interesting angle. I think it definitely elevates the episode from one of those like weird-ass Monster of the Weeks into something a step above that. I know some people really do enjoy this episode because it's pretty unique. I don't really have many thoughts on it. I'm gonna put it in fine, above Colony, below Fire. Next up is Pusher. The agents work to find evidence against a man who uses mind control powers to push people into ending their own life. It ends with Mulder playing Russian roulette and Scully fearing for his life, and there's some great Mulder-Scully moments. So let's talk about those first, because I feel like that's the best part of the episode, is like some of the character work. Throughout the series, there's a number of times where we see Mulder being kind of at his wit's end. So for me, Pusher makes sense as such a terrifying villain to Mulder, if he's already like low-key suicidal, and so maybe he's particularly afraid of this guy because he knows it's not really going to take much to push him over the edge. But honestly, that is kind of speculation. We haven't really seen Mulder reach that point yet in this series. It's not until like seasons 4 and 5 that we really start to get there, but just throwing it out there. There's also a great moment where Mulder and Scully are staking out a phone booth, dozing off, and he like touches her cheek to wake her up, and like that's cute. And then at the very end when he's going to face the killer, there's a moment where they touch hands. Great. That could happen in any X-Files episode. Now it doesn't, and so I have to give this episode some credit. But I'm saying like those are all very small things that could happen in any X-Files episode, and don't really speak to the content of the episode itself. Now let's talk about the problems with the way they implement their concept. To me, the key element here is it has to be suicide. In one of the most high-stakes scenes of the episode, when Pusher ends up killing one of the members of law enforcement Mulder and Scully are working with, basically he talks the man into having a heart attack. That, like, suddenly the episode just, like, falls out. The reason the other things are scary is because the killer equally had a huge hand in it and no hand in it at all. A person cannot will themselves into having a heart attack. So is he controlling their mind or is he controlling their body? And if he's controlling their body, why does he bother with all of these outrageous things? I don't know. He could just kill anyone he wanted with a heart attack. The argument is that, well, he enjoys playing the game. That's why he makes people off themselves in realistic ways. Why does the game stop here? I don't feel like he's really committed. On top of that, the killer in this episode just annoys me so bad. This episode is so aggravating to me. But I know he doesn't really get on some people's nerves the way he gets on mine. It's truly a matter of personal preference. I am putting Pusher at the top of not the best, but I am moving Colony down to be below Pusher also in not the best, because Colony should not be in the fine category. I don't know what I was thinking. Next up is another very divisive episode. This is an episode that people either love it or they hate it. What camp am I in? You'll have to find out. Leave your comment down below to guess now. This episode is called Jose Chung's from Outer Space. Two different accounts of the same story are retold for a writer, Jose Chung, who is working on a sci-fi novel. And there is a victim of an abduction who undergoes hypnosis to remember her abduction. There is an alien who Scully's going to do an autopsy on, but then it turns out to be an Air Force member in an alien costume. Mulder at one point is described as a ticking time bomb, and I like that because like the man is kind of losing it. There's also a funny scene where he eats a lot of pie, but overall, man, this episode is not for me. It kind of attempts to satire the alien abduction genre and I guess the X-Files itself, which would be fine if they had a little more self-awareness about it. Generally speaking, I enjoy a good satire, but you have to earn it. Satirizing aliens when you haven't really been able to write one solid alien episode in almost 3 full seasons on the air. In fact, just a few episodes ago, we decided that Scully wasn't abducted by aliens at all, but she was abducted by a group of doctors who work for the government. But watching the X-Files is kind of an experience in being lied to and gaslit, so who's to say, really? The counterpoint to my argument here, and the common argument used by people who enjoy the episode, which I want to preface by saying I think is a completely fair argument, is that it's one of the only times the X-Files kind of has fun playing with the aliens idea, and because it's not about mythos and they don't have to make all these big decisions, they're willing to be a little more silly, and it's more fun to watch a silly episode that maybe isn't great than it is to watch an episode that's supposed to be great but ends up being silly and making no sense. So I do completely respect that perspective. I just want it to be good. You know what I mean? I also don't really like the way that the young woman who is abducted in this episode is treated. Like, there's a sexual assault involved in this episode that is kind of brushed over, and like, I don't know, I think that's weird. Anyways, when it comes to the love it or hate it, I am on team hate it. Jose Chung's from Outer Space. I'm gonna put this one at the top of FBI's Most Unwanted because it is a silly episode, and also because it's not a mythos, it doesn't have as big of an impact on the series. So yeah, that's what's happening there. Next up is Quagmire. We have Queequeg appearance number 3 in this episode. The agents investigate disappearances in a small town on the water where allegedly a monster named Big Blue lives. The aesthetics in this episode are beautiful. Big Blue is so silly and also confirmed #real at the very end of the episode. Mulder and Scully go out into the water on a boat, which ends up capsizing, and the two of them are stranded in the middle of the night on this like big rock. And they have a beautiful, heartfelt conversation, and God, I love when these agents just sit and talk. They have such a beautiful partnership. Why is no one talking about this? Why is nobody talking about how Mulder and Scully have such a beautiful partnership? Am I the first person to realize that they have something really special? During the investigation, Queequeg is made an honorary FBI agent and leads Scully into the forest for a little walk and is looking for things. And then Queequeg gets eaten by an alligator. Allegedly. To me, Queequeg sat for several hours in the car with Scully and Mulder. She sat for several hours in the little cabin, and she had had enough. Queequeg opted to fake her own death, and it all worked out nice because she met a best friend in the woods, and now they live together happily ever after. It's Queequeg and her alligator bestie and Big Blue. There is a panel that Gillian Anderson did, and this little kid asked her about Queequeg, and she had to be like, "Oh, sweetie, Queequeg died." No! Queequeg did not. He did not die. If you've not watched The X-Files, and you got into this point in the video, and all of a sudden there's like the death of the main dog on the show, I understand if like you're very upset by this, but trust, Queequeg is alive. You know what I mean? I'm not saying we all share my little headcanon that like Queequeg is alive in the woods with Big Blue or whatever, but Queequeg's supposed fate in this episode doesn't get to us because Queequeg is just so alive in our hearts and in the art that we make. Like, you'll be hard pressed to find a piece of just really cute Fox Dana fan art that doesn't include Queequeg. There's like fan art of the two of them like doing a puzzle together, and Queequeg is sitting there. Like, Queequeg is alive and well and part of the world. I get very sad talking about the deaths of characters I really enjoy. To me, it's kind of like #confirm that Queequeg is alive because I can get through Quagmire without being sad. So it's like my soul kind of knows that Queequeg is okay. This diva, the same writers wrote the 3 episodes that Queequeg appears in. So I think when they got to the final of the 3 episodes, they were like, well, we can't afford to have this dog, and we can't work out the logistics for this every single episode. So we're gonna have to come up with something. So yeah, I mean, Queequeg could even be returned to Scully by Big Blue after a little vacation, some time away from the agents, you know. I'm open to anything. Sorry to have yapped so much about a dog, but in coming seasons we're gonna have to talk about some miserable topics, so I'd rather have a little bit of fun while we still can. Quagmire is a god tier episode, easy. I'm gonna put it above Firewalker. The Mulder Scully stuff in this episode is just so precious. Since it deals with Big Blue, it does feel like a true monster of the week episode. Next, we have Wet Wired, where TV signals are modified to influence people, and it causes them to act out on paranoia and their most irrational fears. When Scully ends up being affected, she questions her trust in Mulder. She like has a full-on breakdown. She thinks that she sees him working with CSM, and she goes with her gun to her mom's house, and Mulder shows up and she like points her gun at him and breaks down. It's crazy. This episode is one where like the character stuff that happens as a result of the weird stuff is compelling, but the weird stuff itself like doesn't really make much sense. But that's okay. The lone gunmen are also in this episode, which gives it a plus. We throw out there that the reason Mulder isn't affected by it is because he's red-green colorblind, and it will never be brought up again, except I believe one scene in either season 10 or 11, the revival, when he's looking at Jell-O. I would have just bought it if they said, well, Mulder hasn't watched TV in 6 months, or like Mulder only watches VHSs, or Mulder's TV is broken. The angst in this episode is great, and Gillian Anderson's performance is fantastic. I think I'm gonna put this in the solid tier. You know, it really does live in the same kind of territory as .com, but since this episode has more impactful Scully Mulder scenes, I will put it right above .com in the solid category. Just like that, we are on the season 3 finale. This is a two-parter that leads directly into the season 4 premiere, so as usual I will talk about both of them and then go back and rank. As usual with these Mythos episodes, this is my notes for just these 2 episodes. My nemesis of all time, CSM, visits Mulder's mother, and someone captures photos of their encounter. We are not sure who captured such photos. Mrs. Mulder is then brought to the hospital having suffered a stroke, and she's in serious condition. But using her finger, she writes a message into Mulder's hand, which is palm. They realize that palm must be a reference to a man from this episode who seems to have magic healing abilities because he hovers his palms over someone at the start of the episode, someone who's been shot, and then they end up recovering and they're fine. At the Social Security Administration offices, CSM and some other officials find the magic healing man and take him away. X then shows Mulder pictures of CSM and his mother meeting, which is how we discover it is X who's taking these photos. And knowing there must have been some important reason CSM was meeting with his mother, he decides to go to the summer house where his mother was and look for whatever it may have been she was looking for. While at the house, he realizes that perhaps she was not writing palm, but instead lamp. So he starts smashing lamps, and finally, within one of the lamps, he finds it. It is a weapon that, if used at the base of the neck of these green goo aliens, will kill them. It is kind of the only way to kill them. We get a scene of CSM and the magic healing man, whose name I'll tell you now is Jeremiah Smith, yapping about the project. It's like, which one? Anyway, the man tells CSM he's dying of lung cancer, and CSM is stunned. First of all, your name is Cancer Man. Let's start there. Mulder is told that his mother may not regain consciousness, and he cries by her bedside, and Scully puts a little blanket around him. He is just sopping wet puppy. My sweet boy. CSM then tells Mulder that his mother is the one who contacted him, because he may have information about the whereabouts of Samantha. The Miracle Man, Jeremiah Smith's name comes up 5 separate times in a search by Scully. All 5 of these identical Jeremiah Smiths all work for the SSA. X orders Mulder to hand the stiletto over to him, but Mulder refuses, and X warns him that he is a dead man. Meanwhile, Mulder and the miracle healer Jeremiah Smith meet up, and he tells Mulder the, quote, Samantha, who came to him before, was an imposter. Thought we kind of established this already. Then, the alien bounty hunter shows up to kill Jeremiah Smith. Next up, we have the season 4 premiere. Starts off in Alberta, Canada, where a maintenance worker is stung by a bee and dies. Back at the industrial site, Mulder stabs the shape-shifting alien bounty hunter with the stiletto. It doesn't quite kill him, but it buys him enough time to get away. The bounty hunter tries to kill Scully by choking her, but once he realizes that she truly has absolutely no idea where Mulder is going, he leaves her alone and decides to go try and track down Mulder instead. Mulder and Jeremiah consider going to the hospital to heal Mrs. Mulder, but they know that they are being looked for. The men in black, who are basically like hitmen and people who are hired to work for the syndicate and do their dirty work, they are all after Jeremiah Smith, so they can't go to the hospital. CSM and one of his allies from the syndicate know that there must be some informant. There's someone who has leaked some information to Mulder, which means they need to lay a trap. Mulder finds out he can find his sister in Canada. They end up finding a field full of girls who all look like Samantha at the age she was when she was abducted. These are all just clones and worker drones working on this big farm. They can't communicate, but nevertheless, Mulder scoops one Samantha up and tries to save her. They end up being attacked by a swarm of killer bees. These are the same bees that appear to be genetically engineered. They're the same ones that killed the man at the very start of the episode. They manage to set up a trap and the bounty hunter gets killed. Also, a fun fact, the girl who plays Samantha was stung by a bee while filming this episode, so the cast and crew presented her with a special award for being so brave and going above and beyond in the line of duty, which is very cute. Skinner tells Scully that all of the Jeremiah Smiths have now disappeared, but they still at least have some of his encrypted files from the Social Security Administration, so that's good. They can continue investigating. X then tells Scully that all these like long strings of codes in the file have to do with smallpox vaccinations and tracking numbers. So Scully then reports to this oversight committee within the FBI that there's a project tracking citizens based on information gathered from them during smallpox vaccinations. Also, X tells Scully that Mulder's mother is in danger. I don't even know if I want to get into all this vaccine stuff right now. While vaccine hesitancy is not something new, the latest surge in it definitely came to be right at the end of the 90s when the now thoroughly debunked and retracted paper which links the MMR vaccine and autism was published. This plot doesn't seem to be as harmful as it would be in the modern day, so I'm not going to take away points for it, but there's a whole conversation to be had, especially once we get to the revival seasons, about the responsibility of a series with the conspiracy theories it chooses in a time of rising fascism and, you know, QAnon and conspiracies that are slowly destroying public health. So yeah, now that we've had that tangent, X, because he gives the information to Scully about Mulder's mother, is now the known informant, so he is assassinated. At the scene of his death, he writes SRSG in his blood, and this leads Mulder to find Marita Covarrubias, the assistant to the special representative of the Secretary of the United Nations. She tells him the fields in Canada have been abandoned, and CSM orders the bounty hunter to heal Mrs. Mulder, noting that an enemy with nothing to lose is the most dangerous thing he could have. So Mulder's mother cannot be killed, because then they would have nothing more to hold against Mulder, basically. Season 3 finale is definitely better than Season 4 premiere. They're still not great, but I think I'm going to put Season 3 at the bottom of fine. Season 4 premiere, I'm going to put it right above Fallen Angel in the FBI's Most Unwanted. I could be having a wonderful time watching the X-Files, and then all of a sudden, here comes a Samantha clone we have to deal with. And every time, it's a fake out, and it feels so cheap. It gets old so fast. Moving right along to Season 4, Episode 2, Home. A banger of an episode. Sorry to spoil my ranking, but goddamn. This episode is an absolute classic, iconic episode that many refer to as the X-Files' scariest episode. And in fact, it was deemed so horrifying that they didn't even show it in reruns for years after its original airing. A murdered newborn baby is found buried in a field in Pennsylvania. The baby has some extreme birth defects, and the agents investigate who killed this child. The baby was alive at the time of the burial, so it's a homicide case. The agents investigate the small town, and suspicions gradually close in on a family called the Peacocks, who live on their own on this little farm. Everyone in town is kind of creeped out by them. They decide just to mind their own business, but the agents have to investigate them. They peer through a front door and find probable cause to enter, and end up finding bloody tools on the tables. This is enough to get a warrant for their arrest. It seems they were indeed the ones who buried this child. Now, where did the child come from? It's just the Peacock brothers who live at this home, their parents having died years ago in a car accident. So the agents decide to look into cars that have been abandoned in the area. They think that perhaps the Peacocks have abducted a woman, so that is kind of their new line of approach. They determine that because of the birth defects, the Peacocks have probably been inbreeding for many generations. Turns out, their mother, Mrs. Peacock, actually survived the car accident, and she is now strapped to a board under one of the beds in the home. When Scully discovers her, she asks about the boy's whereabouts, not yet realizing what has actually happened here. Mrs. Peacock is determined to protect her sons. Turns out Mrs. Peacock is the mother of the baby. The boys are just inbreeding with their own mother. As the agents and the local sheriff close in on the Peacocks, the brothers go and murder the local sheriff in an absolutely horrifying, brutal scene. The agents attempt to make an arrest, but one of the brothers manages to take the mother and escape. So now they are just out there somewhere. If you love a good American Gothic episode, this is one for you, for sure. It's horrifying, and it's going at the top of the god tier. I love this episode. Next up is Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man. So this is the tale of CSM and like his backstory and lore as told by the lone gunman, because they think they have found out who he is, what his background is, who he works for, all that kind of thing. It writes CSM into history as a conspirator in JFK's assassination as well as MLK's assassination, and it also makes CSM this writer who's just like really sad no one's publishing his book. We aren't really sure how accurate it is, and this is something the X-Files does a lot on purpose, where it's like, well, it's up to you to decide. Bitch, just tell me. If you just decide on something as a viewer, you're like, this is what makes the most sense. Well, come 2 Mythos episodes away, it's not going to make any sense anymore. And I've really tried to like sit down, figure out how everything can be true, or like the most amount of things that are stated could be true, and like it's just not possible, and unfortunately it just makes everything feel really sloppy. I don't know, some people hype this episode up. It's like something different, and I guess they took a risk, so like good for them. But it's still going, and oh boy, since it doesn't have too big of an impact on other Mythos episodes, I'm going to put it beneath one breath above Nisei. And now we are on to the mid-season 4 2-part Mythos episode. Part 1. An incident in the customs office at an airport exposes an officer to black oil, which results in his death. In New York City, Mulder and Scully raid an apartment, with Alex Krycek being the person who tipped them off in this case. He claims to no longer be working for CSM, which is fair enough because in the previous season, CSM did bomb his car and try to kill him. The agents then intercept a package which is meant to be hand-delivered from Russia. It turns out to be a rock, and some tests are done on it. This rock contains the black oil, which puts one of the men working on the testing into a coma. CSM orders Skinner to find that package and get it returned because it has major international implications if this thing goes missing or if it's stolen. This is one of those episodes that's like, the Cold War, Russia. Marita Covarrubias tells Mulder that the rock came from Russia, and she gets him papers to go visit Russia to investigate. He brings Krycek along, since Krycek is fluent in Russian. And during the investigation, Mulder hypothesizes that the black oil came from a cosmic impact in the area where they are investigating nearly a century ago. Him and Krycek are captured and thrown into a gulag, and prisoners tell Mulder that human experimentation happens there all the time in hopes of creating a vaccine for the black oil virus. Black oil is then thrown on Mulder's face, which infects him, and meanwhile, back in DC, Skinner and Scully are subpoenaed. They have to go appear before Congress and testify to Mulder's whereabouts. On to part 2. Mulder escapes the gulag with Krycek. A former KGB agent visits the United States and assassinates a doctor who has been working on a black oil vaccine for the syndicate. He then tracks down the test subjects from the syndicate doctors, tests the Russian vaccine on them, and then kills them. Mulder interrupts the congressional hearing about his own disappearance by walking right in, and so everything is dismissed, so it was kind of that whole big thing for nothing, but I guess now that Mulder's back, who gives a f***? Then the agents try and track down the KGB assassin. The assassin destroys these rocks that contain the black oil, and then the agents discover that this man was hired for his mission by Alex Krycek. I don't know. This episode just feels like running in circles. I think the whole point of it was to show that there's also a sort of space race, but in regards to viruses that maybe come from space, but maybe not. I don't like these episodes. I'm putting these episodes both at the bottom of not the best, with part 1 going just above part 2. These episodes kind of exist within the black oil timeline, which will tie into the first feature film, but ultimately they're pretty inoffensive episodes, even if I don't really find them very exciting. These episodes are definitely supposed to be thriller episodes, and sure, it feels more like filler than thriller to me. On to happier times with the episode Paper Hearts. In a dream, Mulder connects clues that he has held in his subconscious, and it leads him to find a body. This body is a victim of a serial killer he once helped arrest. He previously thought he knew about all the victims, but now it turns out there is at least one new one. This new murder kind of updates the timeline and means that this man was active way sooner than previously thought, which means it's possible that this man is responsible for the abduction of Samantha Mulder. This episode feels like Mulder's version of Beyond the Sea, the season 1 Scully-centric episode. What really carries it, as with many episodes is David Duchovny's performance, to be honest. There's one scene where the killer tells him the location of another body, and Mulder knows it's a possibility that it's Samantha's, kneeling in the dirt, digging desperately with his bare hands. It is a heartbreaking scene, to say the least. We are given more and more clues that continue to point more and more to the possibility that Samantha was abducted by this man, which is leading Mulder to question everything he believes in. The man tells Mulder all about his memories of the night he abducted Samantha, so Mulder ends up getting him out of jail so he can take him to this home and the man can walk him through it. But Mulder tricks him by taking him to the wrong home, and he still claims to have memories of that home, so Mulder knows the man is just making things up. The man doubles down though and claims to have knowledge about Samantha. He also ends up breaking free from Mulder's custody while on this little trip, and he's about to murder another young girl when Mulder shoots him in the head. Only, of course, after the man points out to him that if he kills him, he won't ever find out the truth about Samantha. Yeah, Mulder, I think, knows that the man is a liar, or like, he doesn't want to be part of these games anymore. He just wants answers. So there's a question of, is the man sending Mulder messages through his dreams? I think Scully's hypothesis is most likely what happens, which is that Mulder already had all these pieces of evidence, and it's just now that, like, his mind is connecting them. When the man is giving him all this information that seems like something only Samantha's kidnapper could know, it's really stuff that, like, Mulder has probably told silly alien conspiracy magazines over the years, and the man found online about him because he wanted to get some kind of emotional revenge on Mulder. You know, so there's other options. The emotional journey Mulder goes on in this episode is what makes it. The final third of the episode is where it starts to kind of drag a little, just a tiny bit, in terms of like the man wanting a new victim. I don't know, I found all of the other stuff in the episode more interesting than like this man now escaping, and I would have been fine with an episode that just felt a little more subtle. When they find the girl's body, they go to her father and tell him the news, and he says, people always say you just want to know what happened because not knowing is worse. And he tells the agents now that he knows, he's glad his wife isn't alive any longer to hear the truth because of how awful it is. And I can't help but wonder if that is part of what guides Mulder to make his decision to shoot the man at the end. Like, maybe hearing the actual truth would be too painful. Maybe hearing that from this father makes Mulder at least temporarily question how much he wants to know. It's a thought-provoking episode in that way. It's also a pretty heavy episode, so it's not necessarily one I'd want to rewatch all the time, despite how fantastic the performances are. I'm going to put it in excellent, and it's going to go beneath, beyond the sea, and above Our Town. Next up is Leonard Betts, where a killer eats parts of his victims to feed his unique diet. It turns out this man regenerates constantly by feeding on cancerous cells and tissues. There's 4 episodes of The X-Files that feel just similar enough where they kind of like fit together nicely, and those episodes are Squeeze, Leonard Betts, Too Shy, and Irresistible. They're all serial killers. 2 of them target women. 3 of them eat their victims. Irresistible is the odd one out in that regard, although it still, for lack of a better word, takes a part of the victim. This is a really cool episode that's like medical sci-fi, if you will, but the most important part, arguably, of the episode is at the end, when Scully is cornered by Leonard Betts. He makes it clear he's going to kill her, and he says, "I'm sorry, but you have something I need." Free her. Leonard Betts is joining many episodes in the excellent tier, right beneath Squeeze, above Red Museum. Next we have Never Again, where Scully meets a handsome stranger whose tattoo speaks to him and urges him to kill. So that's the main premise of the episode. And then on the other hand, we have Scully kind of questioning her path in life and taking her life into her own hands. In watching this, it ties right into like Scully thinking she might have cancer because of what Leonard Betts told her. But I believe these episodes were written and produced in reverse order. So Gillian Anderson has said that she would have played the episode Never Again totally differently if she had known. But regardless, I think it still works really well. This episode makes more sense with it being placed where it is, because otherwise it just kind of comes out of nowhere. So the tattoo has a voice, and the tattoo was voiced by Jodie Foster. What a waste, man. Why did we do this? It could be such a serious, fantastic Scully episode, and it just, like, diminishes it so much. At the end of the episode, there's a great conversation between Mulder and Scully. She, like, points out to him in this episode that she's upset or hurt that, like, she doesn't have a desk in the X-Files office. And at the end of the episode, when they have this conversation, he's like, all this because I didn't get you a desk? What do you mean Scully doesn't have a desk? She'll often sit at the chair in front of his desk when he's telling her about cases. But that is such a small part of their workday. There's, like, what very much looks to be a lab section of the X-Files office. So if I was Scully, I'd be in there. I would not sit next to my yapping, annoying coworker all day. I don't know why this episode decides that's a weird thing. At the end of the day, it's not really about the desk. Either way, though, this episode is going in not the best. I love Scully. I love hearing about her daddy issues. I love seeing her flirt with a stranger. But girl, that tattoo. So it's going at the top of not the best. Okay, here we go. Memento Mori. Dana Scully is diagnosed with cancer. Her tumor appears to be inoperable and untreatable. Scully and Mulder tell Skinner the news, and Scully wants to go through the Justice Department with this, since government conspiracy may be involved with how she got the tumor in the first place. We learned that Betsy, the woman who we learned about in NISEI, is now dead. From Betsy's home, they access a list of names, 11 women, all abductees, all died from brain tumors, except for one woman who is still alive, named Penny. Scully visits Penny. She tells Scully about a doctor who might have been able to save her own life as well as Betsy's if he had just been given a little bit more time to treat them. Scully checks into the hospital to begin treatment. Truth, she tells Mulder, is in me. While in the hospital, Scully is writing the most heartbreaking, sad, and yet beautiful letters to Mulder. The episode clips that have these voiceovers in them are too long for me to include because of copyright. Like, YouTube will not let me upload the video. So I'll read one of my favorite quotes from her writing to you. And if the darkness should have swallowed me as you read this, you must never think there was the possibility of some secret intervention, something you might have done. And though we've traveled far together, this last distance must necessarily be traveled alone. Penny unfortunately passes away, and Scully cries and hugs Mulder. There is a take of this scene where they kiss, but they didn't end up using that one, but it's out there. Though she is still ill, Scully decides she is ready to return to work. So that is the Scully side of things, which I gotta say, probably a 10 out of 10. I don't know if it would make it to the God tier, but definitely excellent. This is all part of Scully's journey. She's decided to put her faith in a potential treatment. Great. Now let's talk about what's going on with Mulder in this episode. It has to do with Scully, but it's like what Mulder is physically doing and discovering. And this is where I start to get mad. Mulder discovers that both Penny and Betsy were childless and undergoing fertility treatments. The man who gave Mulder this information is then assassinated, and he turns into green goo. Mulder finds Scully's name in a database at a fertility clinic, and he follows this lead and deals with alien-human hybrid clones, and then he discovers some of Scully's ova, which evidently were stolen from her during her abduction. He doesn't yet tell Scully about this, by the way, and in my notes I just say, I feel sick. Also, on the conspiracy kind of side of things, Skinner asks CSM what it will take to save Scully. CSM says he'll have to get back to him on that. Is cancer not bad enough? Is her being abducted not enough? This marks the beginning of one of the worst parts of the X-Files, which is the obsession with Scully's womb. It just, I don't know, doesn't really feel necessary to me. It just feels really icky. This is the start of a problem that will eventually be the biggest reason Gillian leaves the X-Files during the revival just a few years ago. It's the fucking obsession with Scully's womb and her fertility, and the obsessive medical rape of Dana Scully for shock value, and basically just taking more and more of her bodily autonomy away from her when they run out of other ideas. I'm gonna get really mad and really upset if I dwell on this for too long right now. Although Memento Mori is a great episode in some regards, it also is the basis of a lot of really disturbing, unnecessary, and frankly misogynistic choices from the showrunner. I'll say, like, David and Jillian are phenomenal in this episode. Jillian won an Emmy this season, and this was the episode submitted. So, like, it is a great episode, but I can't get past the bad shit. I'm sorry. And I'm not saying that Scully can never lose her bodily autonomy at all in the show, or it's automatically misogynistic. It's more about the pattern that's established, and the fact that apparently cancer just wasn't enough. I'm gonna put this in the fine category above grotesque. That's where it evens out to the great stuff, and then the nasty stuff, I'm just kind of sticking it in the middle, because I love the good parts of this episode, and the rest of it, like, each. Let's move on to Kaddish. This is a Monster of the Week episode again. A Jewish man named Isaac is murdered by a small group of neo-Nazis. One of his 3 assailants is found dead with Isaac's fingerprints around his throat. A second killer is murdered when he is preparing to dig up Isaac's body. The suspect for these subsequent murders becomes Isaac's fiancée, whose name is Ariel's, father. The third suspect is found dead in the presence of Jacob, who then confesses to the 3 subsequent murders. But Mulder thinks a golem may actually be the culprit. We see Ariel and this golem exchanging their wedding vows, and then the golem turns back into dust. This is a cool episode that integrates Jewish mythology. I love episodes that are based on established mythology from various religions or cultures. I read that they had considered doing an episode about a golem for quite a while, but they just never quite had the right story for it. This episode really does have a beautiful love story, and it's a compelling investigation. I think I'm going to put this episode in fine. I think I'll put it right below Memento Mori. Next up is Small Potatoes, where a shape-shifting man is responsible for the pregnancies of several local women. This episode is pretty disturbing, but it tries to also be a funny episode, so it's kind of just like... Sorry, I don't think I can find any humor in an episode where 5 separate women have been sexually assaulted. 5 women have all conceived children with this man because he has shapeshifted into their husband. At one point, he shapeshifts into Mulder and flirts with Scully, and yeah, like, if you don't really think about it, it's like, oh my god, how fun, Mulder and Scully are flirting. And then you, like, really think about it. I mean, you don't even have to think that hard about this episode. The whole thing is just really creepy. Now, maybe because it is such, like, a dark crime to happen, that's why they felt the need to kind of lighten the mood with a little bit of humor throughout the episode, but honestly, the episode just kind of makes me sick to my stomach. The only good thing we got out of this episode is the silly gif where, like, Mulder's grinning, and it's not even real Mulder, so I don't even really like using it all that much anymore because it's fake Mulder. I'm putting this episode beneath Excelsis Day in FBI's Most Unwanted. Next up is Zero Sum. This whole episode is basically about the experimental bees that we saw at the start of the season, and Skinner is, like, trying to find a cure for Scully's cancer. That's pretty much all it amounts to. That's all I'm gonna share. This is a pretty boring Mythos episode, even though I'm desperate for Scully to find a cure. You know what would elevate this episode to the god tier? Is if we brought back Dr. Bambi Berenbaum, who works for the Department of Agriculture, who maybe they could, like, call up and see if she could get some inside scoop on these bees, but instead, for some reason, last season we had Marita Covarrubias do it, and I think implicating the UN in all of this just makes everything even messier. Bring back Bambi, thank you, and we will see about giving this episode a better score. But since that did not happen, I'm putting this episode beneath the musings of a cigarette smoking man in Oh Boy, because nothing particularly super bad happens in this episode. It's just not interesting at all. Next up, we have the season 4 finale, Gethsemane. A man from the Smithsonian calls Mulder about something he found, something pertaining to aliens. So Mulder calls Scully to tell her about it. She is kind of reluctant about getting involved because she's dying. She's just trying to enjoy a dinner with her family. Apparently, up in the Canadian mountains, an alien body is found. Samples from the area directly surrounding it are sent to America for testing. Scully makes sure they get tested. Unfortunately, she is attacked and the samples are stolen. Scully finds her attacker and holds him at gunpoint. This man's going to become sort of important moving forward. His name is Kritschgau. Now, this man tells Scully that the people who gave Scully her cancer will also kill her, and they'll kill him too. The alien sample itself is then sent for autopsy, but it turns out to be a fraud. Krichgau tells Mulder that everything he knows about extraterrestrials is a lie, and that it's all just scientific anomalies. Because the lies about the military-industrial complex are so deep, the only way to cover them is to create something even more incredible. They invented you, your regression hypnosis, your sister's abduction. Scully even tells him that Krichgau claims they gave Scully cancer as a way to make Mulder believe. This all makes Mulder spiral. Because what? And low-key, it would make me spiral, but the number of times we've been lied to means that I can't really put much weight into this theory. There is no reason to believe that this is any more of the truth than anything else anyone has ever told us throughout the series. So I'm like, okay. And then I'm also not sure exactly which parts of this are meant to be new information to us, because the episode 731, just last season, also tried to establish that aliens were being used as cover-ups for greater crimes within the military-industrial complex. We also know that Scully has cancer because of her abduction, so the news that, like, Scully was given cancer isn't news, per se. I guess the fact that it was given to her in order to prove something to Mulder is, but, like, why do they give a f*** about this guy? If the X-Files and the hypnosis was all created to steer Mulder towards looking into extraterrestrial life, what reason did they have to lead him there? His focus was in psychology and he was working for violent crimes. I don't know about all of this. Anyway, in the opening scene of this episode, we see Scully stepping into an apartment and identifying a body, and now in front of a panel at the conclusion of the episode, Scully shares that she found Agent Mulder in his apartment, dead of an apparent gunshot wound to the head. Although it's a very exciting cliffhanger, fans already know that Agent Mulder is not dead because we already had confirmation that Gillian Anderson and David Duchovny were set to star in an X-Files feature film to be released at the end of season 5. So we will go through the next 2 episodes and then rank all of these. Season 5 premiere, Mulder is suicidal and he calls someone to try and find out if they actually did this to Scully because of him. It turns out he's being monitored, so he shoots the guy. It seems that the timing of this alien body hoax mentioned in the season 4 finale was planned so that Scully would already be dead by the time it happened. CSM is told the news that Mulder is dead. This kind of gives Mulder some time to be sneaky and find some answers. If he finds a cure, there's good news and bad news. The good news, Scully's cancer would be cured. One may say that's great news. The bad news would mean that it's true that the whole thing was a lie and a cover-up and conspiracy all this time, and there's probably no such thing as aliens, and he was tricked and used as a pawn. Scully desperately searches for a possible connection between alleged conspirators and the cancer killing her. She finds DNA in the samples from the ice, which matches the virus that caused her cancer. This is enough for her, so at a hearing with a panel at the FBI, Scully is ready to name someone pretty high up in the FBI as a conspirator, but then she gets a nosebleed and collapses. Mulder tests the sample he got from the Pentagon, which may be a cure for Scully's cancer, and it turns out it isn't a cure, it's just some deionized water. In Redux Part 2, Mulder hurries to the hospital to see Scully, but he is detained and questioned about why there were lies in his death, and Mulder tells Scully he wants to reveal the whole conspiracy to the public. CSM then tries to reason with Mulder, saying he thinks he might be able to get Mulder to join his side if he's given a good enough reason, and he tells Mulder he can cure Scully's cancer by using a chip from the vial that Mulder stole from the Pentagon. Krichgau makes a claim to work for the Defense Department as well as a lobbying firm known as Roche. Mulder then tells Scully about the chip and the fact that it may cure her, and although her family is skeptical about it, Scully decides to trust Mulder's judgment here and have the chip implanted in her neck. CSM and Mulder meet, and he brings a Samantha clone with him. She claims not to remember anything about her abduction, and also she calls CSM her father. CSM offers Mulder the truth about his sister if he will quit the FBI and come work for him instead. Blevins, who is the man in the pilot episode who assigned Scully to the X-Files, tries to convince Mulder to name Skinner as the traitor within the FBI. Mulder tells Scully about this, and he says he's considered CSM's offer until Blevins' offer because it told him that something was up with Blevins. Blevins is the man within the FBI, like I just said, who assigned Scully to the X-Files in the first place. So isn't that like the first person we should have suspected? But then again, I don't think we've seen this man for like 4 years. So this guy shows up, it's like, who the fuck is that guy? With Mulder in all kinds of trouble now, Scully wants to take the blame for killing that man at the start of the episode, since she's probably gonna die anyway. And Mulder cries with her. It's really sad. And yeah, Scully is just really, really sick. Like, she's gonna die. A hitman shoots CSM, and after Mulder reveals that Blevins is the traitor, Blevins is also shot, but it's framed to look like a suicide. At the hospital, Skinner tells Mulder that Blevins has been on Roche's payroll as well as Krichgau, and also that Scully's cancer has gone into remission. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad we spent all this time rehashing, and yet Scully finding out that her cancer is cured doesn't get screen time. This episode has both Mulder and Scully questioning their faith. So there's Mulder questioning the existence of extraterrestrials and like his entire quest, and then Scully questioning her Catholic faith. And it feels really ashamed because she has kind of abandoned her faith, but now she needs it back more than ever. So at the end of the day, when Scully is cured, it was left kind of ambiguous whether the chip is actually what cured her, or if it was her faith, or if it was just the fact that she has been undergoing treatment. Also, in regards to this episode, one of the executive producers says, quote, "Fans never seemed to accept this turn of events, and they refused to see the cigarette-smoking man as victorious." It's not that we don't want to see him as victorious, it's just that it doesn't make any sense for there to have never been any such thing as aliens. And also, because the show has chosen, in nearly every Mythos episode, to have at least one informant or government official tell several blatant lies about what's happening, like I said, why would we believe this one? Mulder potentially finding a cure for Scully's cancer is not convincing enough for me, because we've already been told that Scully was experimented on by doctors, not by aliens, so we know she was kidnapped by the government. Do you know what I'm saying? We also have to laugh at this quote from showrunner Chris Carter when he says about this episode, quote, "I think the story has a crystal purity and clarity." I don't know, man. I don't know what the f is going on anymore. These episodes all suck ass. The only interesting thing about these 3 episodes, I would say, is Scully questioning her faith, and then the scene where Scully is ready to name a possible conspirator from within the FBI. For these reasons, I don't know. I think these all belong in FBI's Most Unwanted. I'm gonna put Gethsemane right beneath Paperclip, Redux and Redux Part 2 side by side right above Endgame. Sure. What the hell? Anyway, that concludes Cancer Arc. Thank God we made it through. Our next episode is Detour. This episode is fun, so we get to have some fun again, because whatever happened to fun? The agents are en route to a team building seminar when they encounter essentially a monster investigation going on, so of course Mulder's like, oh no, we can't go to the team building seminar, they need our help here. They end up stranded out in the woods overnight and have to survive. The Mulder-Scully relationship is definitely the best thing about this episode, and it has some great parallels to Quagmire, because it also has a scene set in the middle of the night where Mulder and Scully are like contemplating life together. Scully opens up a little bit about how she's feeling now that she is in remission. She also holds Mulder in her arms and sings to him. Gillian Anderson has said that filming this scene is one of her favorite X-Files memories, so I love that little piece of lore. When they're still in the hotel investigating, she goes to Mulder's with wine and cheese. There's a comment about how they aren't supposed to be in the same hotel room as one another, but she's come by with wine and cheese. We know what she was up to. I think we all know what Scully's plans were that night. The monster itself is not among the most memorable of the X-Files, but everything else in this episode is just absolute peak Mulder Scully, so this is going in the God tier. I think I'm going to put it right beneath Quagmire. Next up, we have the postmodern Prometheus. This is an episode inspired by Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. The episode is entirely in black and white, and it also features the music of Cher. The music is really fun. At the end, they go and see Cher in concert. Mulder and Scully dance. There is allegedly a take where they kiss as well. They always just are doing that. I started with the good news. The bad news is that, unfortunately, our Dr. Frankenstein is not making silly little monsters. Instead, guess what this episode has? You guessed it. Medical rape. We could have just leaned into the sci-fi, but no, no, no. Our showrunner had to be fucking weird again. Yeah, so unfortunately, that brings down this episode drastically. I think I'm going to put it at the top of Oh Boy because the plot could be reworked without that stuff. Like I said, we could have leaned into the sci-fi elements and just had a Frankenstein creating monsters by other means. Next up, we have another pair of back-to-back Mythos episodes. These ones are once again Scully-centric. One is pretty good, and one makes me want to take actions that would result in a restraining order. So we'll start with Christmas Carol. While visiting family in San Diego for Christmas, the alleged suicide of a woman seems to beckon Scully's attention. Evidence suggests the husband actually murdered her, and he confesses but dies in jail, allegedly hanging himself. The couple leaves behind a sick daughter who is undergoing experimental treatments and who bears a striking resemblance to Scully's late sister, Melissa. Scully tells her mother in this episode that she is unable to have children as a result of her abduction. Scully attempts to adopt Emily, but the social worker feels it isn't appropriate given her line of work and lack of support to raise a child. Scully continues to dig into the circumstances surrounding Emily. When she does a DNA test, it turns out the child is not Melissa's, but Scully's. Remember when I said this series was going to become super obsessed with Scully's uterus? Yeah. This episode essentially is a mystery until it leads up to the big reveal. Everything up until the big reveal, I like. It's a compelling episode. I think Scully just having this innate connection to a family she's never met is a fascinating thing to play with. And then it all goes down the drain. But it's fine until then, so I'm gonna put this episode in fine, right above the season 3 finale. Part 2 is called Emily. Mulder meets Scully out in California to warn her that somebody killed Emily's adoptive parents, and Scully may be in danger too. Turns out Emily is some kind of genetic experiment. As Emily becomes more and more ill, she ends up being hospitalized, and Mulder visits her doctor to ask for medical records, but he refuses to release them. Mulder calls the man a medical rapist. Yep, and he finds more Scully-related experiment stuff in test tubes. My notes just say, ew. Emily's now in a coma, and there is no way to treat her, and her life is going to be a living hell because of the nature of how she came to be. Scully says whoever brought Emily into this world didn't do so with the intentions of loving her, but of her serving an agenda. So Scully lays with Emily to comfort her as she passes. And at the funeral, Scully says, "Who are the men who would create a life whose only hope is to die?" And Mulder says, "I don't know, but that you found her and you had a chance to love her, maybe she was meant for that too." All of the medical evidence ends up being destroyed except for Emily's body, but unfortunately when they open Emily's casket, she is gone too, leaving only Dana's gold cross necklace, which she had given to Emily. I'm putting this episode in FBI's Most Unwanted, and I think I'm gonna put it right below Paperclip. I think the reason it's not going any lower than this is because events in Scully's life lead up to this moment, but after Emily, it's like never really brought up that much again. At least this episode isn't saying that everything we've said since the very beginning is a lie, so I just want to move on. Next up is Chinga. This is a Stephen King episode where Scully tries to have a peaceful little vacation in Maine, just take a few days for herself after all the shit she's been through. Then there's a killer doll. This episode was written by Stephen King. It sucks, except for the Mulder and Scully moments where they have phone calls with one another, and Mulder is so pathetic. Mulder keeps bothering Scully during her vacation, and I will say in Mulder's defense, it's clear that like they are both struggling just as much as one another to actually have a relaxing vacation. It just took Mulder a little less time than Scully. Scully has a line that indicates they both agreed to take a weekend off, so it's not like Mulder is disrespecting her vacation because he's still working. It seems more like he is just struggling to know what to do on his days off. So I'm not going to kick Mulder in the shins for calling Scully. This episode is a good one for the not the best category, but where to put it? At the bottom. I don't give a f. I think this is a Oh Boy episode, to be honest. I'll put it at the top of the tier though, since there is some pretty redeeming Mulder Scully stuff Next up, we have Kill Switch, where the agents investigate the murder of a renowned programmer. There is a murderous AI targeting its owner in order to avoid being shut down. This episode really questions what it means to be alive and conscious. If you're interested in this theme as a whole, I definitely recommend the video game called Soma. This episode is fine. There's like a hot woman programmer, and there's a brief moment where it kind of hints at Scully thinks she's hot, so that's fun. But the exposition in this episode is really clunky. I don't know. I'm gonna put it in not the best. I guess I'll put it above Shadows in Space. That's probably where it deserves to go, even though I don't love this episode. It is what it is. Next up, we have finally a good episode to talk about. This one is called Bad Blood. Mulder kills a suspect. It's someone he thinks might be a vampire, but then it turns out the vampire fangs are fake, which means they are in big trouble and they're gonna have to answer to Skinner. So Mulder and Scully discuss their weekend working on the case to make sure they get their story straight before they go in and talk to Skinner. So we get two perspectives of everything that happens in the episode. It's actually a really funny episode. I think this is probably my favorite of the comedy episodes of the X-Files. There is a pizza delivery man vampire. There's a vibrating bed. There's whining at Mulder because she has to do so many autopsies and all she ate that day was half a bagel with cream cheese, and it wasn't even regular cream cheese, it was light cream cheese. Just banger after banger. This is a god tier episode. I think I'm gonna put it right behind Home. Next up, we have The End, which is the season 5 finale. So for context, originally the series was going to end with season 5, and then there was going to be a series of films. But the show was still doing so well, and Fox didn't really want to lose out on that money, so they decided to renew the series. This meant that now the season 5 finale had to not only lead appropriately into the feature film, but also work as a segue into the next season of the show. It's a pretty hefty task. A man is assassinated at a chess tournament. The agents discover that the assassin's true target was the man's opponent, a young boy named Gibson who can read minds. CSM is found alive in Canada by Krychek. When I tell you this man is William Afton, he always comes back. There's a new character introduced in this episode named Diana Foley. She is Mulder's former partner, definitely his ex-girlfriend, and the lone gunman tells Scully that they worked together when he first discovered the X-Files. Agent Spender, who was working on the initial assassination investigation, is accused by Mulder of working for CSM. This is because there must have been some kind of inside job. They're taking turns watching over Gibson to protect him, and Diana Foley is shot and Gibson is kidnapped by the Men in Black. Because Mulder meddled in the assassination investigation, which has huge implications, once again, US and Russia shit, the Department of Justice is now demanding that the X-Files be shut down. They just kind of want to take the blame for this investigation and put it all on the X-Files unit. CSM goes to the X-Files office and takes Samantha Mulder's X-File, and then he lights the office on fire, and on his way out, he tells Spender that he is his father. And then Mulder and Scully get to the office and find everything is destroyed. So it's not the first time the X-Files is shut down, but the stakes this time and the circumstances leading up to it all feel way bigger. And honestly, I think it fits right into a movie. I think this segues really nicely into a feature film, because we just end on such a big note. Although I will say there's a lot of shit happening in this episode, but none of it's bad. This episode is fine. I'm gonna put it right beneath Memento Mori. I like the stuff that goes on with Scully a little more than the drama that happens in this episode. And now for the first of two feature films, Fight the Future. We open on a scene in Texas where black oil is present. Meanwhile, Mulder and Scully investigate a bomb threat, but they unfortunately are too late to detonate the bomb, and a bunch of people in the building are killed. They then discover that this bombing may have been intended to cover up the people's true cause of death, which was an alien virus. CSM goes to Texas and discovers that one of the men who died in Texas has an alien organism growing in his body. He orders the doctor to administer a vaccine, but the parasitic alien thing ends up killing the doctor. Mulder and Scully tried to investigate this parasite thing in Texas, but they are attacked by killer bees and they have to run. Back in DC, Scully tells Mulder that she has been ordered to transfer to a different branch of the FBI, so she has tendered her resignation letter. She simply wants out of all this. She says she was assigned to debunk his work, she's only ever held him back, but Mulder says, "No, you've saved me." This is the best scene of the whole film, by the way. He says, "You made me a whole person, and I owe you everything." And he says he doesn't want to do this alone. It doesn't know if he even can do it alone. And then they are about to kiss. Their lips are like this. And then Scully says, "Ow!" and she got stung by a bee. Fuck the bees, man. This would not have happened if we had Bambi Berenbaum on the case. Scully collapses because the bees are, weapons, and Mulder calls for help, and then the ambulance driver shoots Mulder before taking Scully away. A former member of the syndicate gives Mulder Scully's location and a vaccine, and then he kills himself to hide his betrayal. Mulder rushes to Scully in Antarctica. There are like human beings in these big tanks there being used for experimentation. It's pretty similar to the ERLENMEYER flask when he finds those tanks in the warehouse. He breaks Scully out of the tank and gives her the vaccine, and she wakes up. Then they manage to get out of there, and they just collapse into the ice and are like laying in the snow, exhausted. And then an alien spaceship emerges from the ground and flies off. So the proof that they have now of some sort of conspiracy or extraterrestrials, or I don't know, it's just proof of the truth, whatever the that means at this point, is the bee. So they present that as evidence and are like, but we can't investigate it because we don't have all the tools we need. So the X-Files are reopened, but CSM notes that Mulder still remains a great threat. I think Fight the Future is solid. I'm going to put it at the top of the solid tier. I think getting a full film is amazing. And of course, the hallway scene, which is the almost kiss scene, is... It could not be more iconic. Also worth noting, guess what? Guess what one of the takes has? Not only do they kiss, they go at it. They go crazy. Jillian pushes David up against the wall. I'm gonna start blushing. Thank you so much to the bonus features for that content. Season 6, episode 1 is called The Beginning. Mulder has been working to try and recover everything he can from the X-Files office, and unfortunately he and Scully are denied reassignment to the X-Files. Agent Spender and Agent Foley are the agents who will now be assigned to the X-Files. We get more of the young boy named Gibson in this episode, the mind reader. It's said that he has alien virus DNA in him. We also get more of the black oil, which basically infects someone and causes them to incubate an alien within them, and then the alien will burst out of them and kill. An alien escapes from someone and they end up chasing the alien down to a power plant where Mulder hypothesizes it's going for the warmth. Foley, meanwhile, is claiming to want to protect the X-Files and protect Mulder, and she says that she's working on the X-Files for a good reason. It's in good faith, so even though this is really Mulder's project, she says it's in good hands. However, after the incident with the alien at the power plant, Scully is able to tell Mulder that her case notes were simply not accurate. Instead of saying the DNA is alien, she simply says that the DNA is something that all humans contain, only it's activated in Gibson, whereas it isn't active in everyone else. So yeah, she's a lying liar. And finally, Mulder and Scully are assigned to work under Assistant Director Kirsch, as opposed to Assistant Director Skinner. This episode is either fine or not the best. I think I'm gonna put it in not the best, right under Never Again. It does an okay enough job wrapping up everything from the movie. It still kind of feels like they're just throwing shit out there. This is obviously pretty common in Mythos episodes though, so it's not that this episode is uniquely mid. At least it's not bad, I guess. As we kind of transition into this late Mythos, it just feels so different. Everything after Fight the Future feels different. Honestly, it might simply be that now they're filming in LA. I feel like viewers can really pick up on that. There's like the change in production. But yeah, things start to feel even more different. I would say once we get to Sixth Extinction, which is the season 7 premiere. Yeah, there's still some very good episodes in the late X-Files season, so don't get me wrong. Anyways, let's not mourn yet. We still have some great stuff ahead. I have, I think, 29 episodes left in this list. Some of these Monster of the Weeks we're just going to kind of fly through because they're pretty simple. Next up, we have Triangle. Mulder enters a time warp while searching for a missing ship in the Bermuda. He basically ends up in the 1940s. He's on a ship that's being overtaken by Nazis. It's possible that he went to the Bermuda to try and find the ship and then he was knocked out right away. as opposed to him actually being on a ship from the 1940s. On this ship in the past, CSM is there and Scully is there, but she doesn't know him, so yeah, it's like a dream. In the dream, he and Scully are kind of cornered, and he says, "In case we never meet again," and then he kisses her, and then she punches him. Meanwhile, in the present, Scully is trying to jump through hoops in order to contact the Navy about getting Mulder's current location. Mulder eventually wakes up in the hospital. Scully's there and the lone gunmen are there. He tells Scully, "I love you," and she says, "Oh, brother." Technically speaking, this is the first on-screen Mulder and Scully kiss, so that's something. It's a fun episode. It is just silly enough. I think this might make it to the God tier. I think I'm going to put it at the bottom of the God tier. Next up is How the Ghosts Stole Christmas. Mulder brings Scully to a haunted house on Christmas Eve. In this home in 1917, a couple made a suicide pact and both died in the home. The agents end up going inside the home where they encounter the ghosts of this couple, who are played by Ed Asner and Lily Tomlin. This episode is mostly just a character study. It's a fun, silly Christmas episode. It was the lowest budget of the whole season, and there are also only 4 actors on stage. These ghosts lure people in every Christmas Eve and try to get them to turn on each other, usually couples, but in this case they're just partners, but we all know what's really going on, right? Eventually Mulder and Scully shoot each other, but each other is only an aberration that the ghosts are creating, so they haven't actually shot each other, but they think they both have. Mulder says, "Scully, it's not real, we're being tricked," and so they're able to stand up and leave the haunted house. That night they give each other Christmas gifts, even though they both promised they weren't going to do gifts that year, and they sit on the couch and have a silly time. One of the things the ghost tells Scully is that her only joy in life is proving Mulder wrong, and that like she's only there because she wanted to prove him wrong. But when she goes to see him that night, she says that she maybe did just want to be out there with him. And then the ghost was pointing out like how sad Mulder is and how lonely his life is, and I think through his partnership with Scully we see how full and rich his life is. So it's a sweet episode. This is always one that, because it's just such a fun, easy watch, and I think it's probably an episode I will watch every Christmas Eve. I watched it this year with 2 of my besties, and it was so fun. Yeah, I'm gonna put it in God tier. I think I'm gonna put it right above Eve in the God tier. Next up, we have The Rain King, where a man claims to have control over the weather, so he goes to different towns and charges people to make it rain. And then we learn that the weather is actually controlled by a man's emotions, and weather has been pretty tumultuous because he has an unrequited love. I'm not super crazy about the whole premise of this episode, but there is a pretty important Mulder-Scully related scene in this, where Scully tells a woman the best relationships are the ones that are born out of friendships. One moment you're friends, and then the next moment suddenly they're the only person you can imagine yourself with. You can't see, but I'm giggling and kicking my feet right now. This episode is fine. I'm gonna put it above the season 3 finale, right below Christmas Carol. Next, we have SR 819. Skinner is ill and he's given 24 hours to live. Mulder and Scully suspect government involvement. There is like a Senate bill involved, and FBI's Most Unwanted. This is gonna go, for now, I'm just gonna put it at the bottom of FBI's Most Unwanted, because I think at the bottom 2 tiers I have some sorting out to do. Next, we have Monday. A desperate woman is trapped in a time loop of Mondays, and she tries to warn the agents about their impending doom during a bank robbery. What's fun about this episode? Mulder has a waterbed. That's fun. We get to see all the different ways the bank robbery plays out. Sometimes we'll get so close to like things going right, the agent's not dying, and then something else goes wrong and causes them to die anyway. There's one particularly memorable scenario where Mulder gets shot and Scully is sitting there trying to stop the bleeding. This is a fun episode. I'm gonna put it in solid above Humbug. Next up, we have Arcadia. In this episode, Mulder and Scully go undercover as a married couple to investigate disappearances in a planned community. The fake marriage stuff, super fun. Iconic, one of the greatest of all times, possibly the best fake marriage to ever fake marriage. He calls her Honey Bunch and she calls him Poopy Head. The actual case and like the monster in this episode, I want so badly to like this episode because the fake marriage stuff is cute, but I always sit down with such high expectations and I'm like, this episode is not good. It's really not good. It's like a weird garbage monster and then an evil homeowners association president. And so everything in the neighborhood has to be kept perfect and by accordance to the rules, otherwise people will die. I'm gonna put it in Oh Boy, but I'm gonna put it right above Chinga. No, I can't put it that low. Okay. I'm gonna put Arcadia in not the best. And it's gonna go, I think, at the top of not the best. That feels right. Next up is Milagro. A writer who is fixated on Scully is a suspect in several killings. He's also Mulder's neighbor, and he seems to know Scully's most intimate and private thoughts, and he gradually bewitches her. He becomes a suspect because he's basically writing murders and then they happen. In the end, he tries to literally tear her heart out, but she manages to shoot him. He also says he's going to write that Agent Scully falls in love, but he says it's impossible because Agent Scully is already in love. Kind of the high point of the episode. It's maybe a fun insight into Scully as a character, but I don't know. I don't think men should be perceiving her. And instead of coming in it as a possible love interest angle, I think it would be more compelling if it was another woman who was not romantically interested in Scully, because I think if she was, that would have some bad implications. But yeah, this is the episode that I think should have been the Jodie Foster episode. I think she should have played the writer, or at the very least, the voiceover for the dialogue written like in Scully's voice. Yeah, that's how I feel. That's how Sue sees it. This episode, I would say, is probably also not the best. I'm gonna put it right above Kill Switch. Next up, we have Three of a Kind. The lone gunmen trick Scully into coming out to Vegas to help them investigate a case. The lone gunmen have come to a defense convention in hopes of finding a woman who Byers fears was killed in a cover-up. This is basically a military conspiracy cover-up episode, but put in a more light-hearted-ish way. We get Scully injected with a tranquilizer, and so she's high at one point. We have some lone gunman shenanigans. So that stuff is kind of fun, but the episode overall, I'm like, I don't really give a f. I think this is deserving of Oh Boy, but I'm gonna put it at the top of Oh Boy, because I do like the lone gunman. Next, we have Field Trip. While investigating a missing couple, the agents stumble upon some toxic mushrooms. So they're both trapped underground by this mushroom goo, which is like slowly digesting them, and they both hallucinate about different things. Scully about how losing Mulder would change and ruin her life. Mulder, how his life would change and like be suddenly boring and meaningless if Scully just suddenly believed him about everything. Thanks to Skinner, they end up getting rescued and they're put on an ambulance and they hold hands on the ambulance. So that part is great. But the rest of it, honestly, it feels like a rehashing of everything that we kind of discovered in How the Ghost Stole Christmas, which was like just a few months ago. So I don't know why we're going through all this again. The toxic mushrooms idea is kind of cool, but to do something that I feel like we've already well established, I don't know. This is a Oh Boy episode. I'm gonna put this episode, you know what, with Chinga, I'm gonna move Three of a Kind because Chinga has some really good Mulder Scully stuff that Three of a Kind does not have. So Three of a Kind is gonna go beneath Chinga, and Field Trip is gonna go beneath One Breath. So yeah, that's a good chunk of Monster of the Weeks. And now we are on to the Season 6 finale and the 2 episodes that open Season 7. So the Season 6 finale is called Biogenesis. An artifact containing Navajo writing is found in Africa. The artifact, when in Mulder and Scully's possession, begins to impact Mulder's health, so Scully sends him to rest, and she seeks Albert's help with the artifact, hoping he can help her translate it. The writing on the artifact suggests basically that all of us descend from aliens. When Scully calls Mulder to give him an update on the artifact, it's Diana Foley who answers the phone. So first of all, what the f is she doing with Agent Mulder? Mulder is soon moved to the hospital where he is in really bad shape. He's undergoing psychiatric care and he has abnormal brain activity. Scully decides to ask why Diana was with him, and she says Mulder called her because she's the only one who would believe him about the artifact. But Scully knows this is obviously a lie because she is willing to take Mulder's side, and if he really feels that something is affecting him or that something has big implications, like, she's gonna hear him out. I mean, she might not agree with him, but if something is so important, he's gonna tell Scully. A professor who Scully has been working with gives her a call from Africa and tells her that he thinks the artifact is part of a map of the human genome. And then he is shot and killed, and it turns out he is killed by Alex Krycek. So Scully heads to Africa to join the research in hopes of finding answers to Mulder's condition. Honestly, I did not really mind this episode. I was kind of surprised because I kept waiting for something stupid to happen, but it never really did. Like, it's an okay episode. Pleasantly surprised, and I think I'm gonna put it at the top of the fine tier. But don't worry, we still have 2 more parts, so next up is The Sixth Extinction, Part 1. Mulder attacks Skinner at the hospital, but really he just does this to pass him a tattered piece of his hospital gown that says "help me" on it. In Africa, Scully sees a man, and then he disappears, and then she is swarmed by bugs. The next day, she meets a doctor named Amina Ngebe, and she warns Scully not to tell the others about the man or the swarm, because these are all signs of bad luck. A man is boiled in the ocean the next day, and the ocean also becomes blood red, all more signs of a warning. Mulder manages to communicate to Skinner that he needs help from Krichgau. So Krichgau comes to him with some sort of treatment. And apparently Mulder can now read minds. He knows that Diana is a double agent. Like, something is not right here. So he really wants to get Scully back because Scully will know what to do. In Africa, the women continue to map out their information. I love this scientific work that Scully is doing. It's so exciting. And yeah, she eventually returns to Mulder and she tells him he is not dying, but it's really not looking great for Mulder, and she holds his hand and asks him to just hold on a little longer. Lots of people love to talk about Mulder getting it on with Krycek in Russia in the Gulag, but we don't have enough discussion about Scully lesing out in Africa with Dr. Ngebe. I think the concept of finding alien information that explains so much about science as we know it is really compelling. So Scully being involved in that type of research for this episode in order to save Mulder, she's really just putting her faith in the work and hoping that Mulder is right and that whatever secrets about science these artifacts hold, it will be enough to save Mulder. So once again, honestly, a banger episode. I was having a great time. So Memento Mori is a much more memorable episode, but man, I really hate what they do to Scully in it, but I think it is a better episode than these ones. I am moving Memento Mori to the top of the fine tier. The Sixth Extinction is going to go right above Biogenesis. So the fine tier is now Memento Mori, Sixth Extinction, Biogenesis. And now we have The Sixth Extinction Part 2. CSM visits Mulder and gives him an injection, and then he tells him that he is his father. I don't even... Alright. Krichgau tells Scully that Mulder was infected with an alien virus several years ago. This would be when he was in Russia, at the Gulag, and the black oil infected him. I think that's what this is trying to say. I don't know what else this would have been, but also, is this a different black oil from the black oil that causes, like, the alien parasite? Because Mulder's symptoms are completely different from those. So I don't know. He has a virus. An alien virus. Since he started coming in contact with that artifact, which is also alien in nature, that's what reactivated the virus in him. Sure. Scully receives a package saying one man will save them all from an impending apocalypse. CSM takes Mulder out of the hospital and shows him a home that could be his, and in this home he sees Deep Throat, his old informant who is alive, and later on Diana Foley comes to him and the two of them hook up. Mulder reunites with his sister Samantha, he marries Diana Foley, and they have kids, and then it's all a dream, and this is all just happening inside of Mulder's head as he's being experimented on. CSM is planning on having parts of Mulder's brain, which have been infected with the alien virus, implanted into his own head, because this would make him immune to the incoming alien apocalypse. Krycek kills Krichgau, and Scully eventually gets access to the facility and finds Mulder. She speaks to him as he's unconscious to try and wake him up from this dream state, and then she helps him escape, and she tells him that Diana Foley has been murdered, and then, Mulder recovers, and he has bandages around his head and a little baseball cap on, and he says that Even as the world was falling apart around him, Scully was his touchstone, his constant, and she says, "And you were mine," and there's a very sweet forehead kiss. Yay, he's okay. But what the f? Like, I got to this episode in this 3-part arc and suddenly remembered, like, why I had blocked out this arc before. Cause yeah, like, the first 2 parts, they're fine, but it all leads to shit. This is an FBI's most unwanted. Potentially even the most unwanted now. I'm gonna put it at the bottom for now. As you know, things are gonna shift around in that bottom tier. Next up, we have Orison. This is a sequel to the episode Irresistible, the episode with the death fetishist. The killer from Irresistible, named Donnie, escapes prison. There's a lot of spiritual themes in this episode, and it seems that a priest may have been the one who helped him escape. Ultimately, Donnie attacks Scully at home, and it's harrowing as f. The scene feels like it lasts forever. Mulder gets a call that Donnie has killed again, and this is when he calls Scully, and when Scully doesn't answer, Mulder goes over to her place. Luckily, he does arrive in time, and Scully is technically safe now, but shit is f***ed up in this apartment of hers, and so she decides to shoot and kill Donnie. Mulder says that as far as he's concerned, Scully didn't have a choice but to shoot him, and his report will reflect as much. There's quite a bit more to this episode regarding, like, the priest and the themes of faith, but the thriller part of the episode, in my opinion, is more memorable than any of that. When you have a villain from another episode that was so memorable, just kind of focuses in on that. You know what I mean? This is a pretty good episode, even though I'm not happy that Scully had to go through that shit. I'm gonna put it in solid, and I'm gonna put it above wet wired. That looks good to me. Next, we have kind of a hidden gem of an episode. It's called The Amazing Malini. In this episode, the agents investigate a magician. During a performance, he does a trick where he can turn his head around 360 degrees, and then his head falls off. But it seems like he's been dead for more than just a few minutes, which is so crazy. This is perhaps the X-Files truest whodunit episode. You know I love a good whodunit. I love Agatha Christie. There's several red herrings, and then a red herring that turns out not to be a red herring at all, a faked identity, and it's such a Christie thing where if you have an actor or performer, you gotta keep an eye on them. Turns out this magician actually killed his brother and then took his place. Because of, long story short, there's like gambling debt. But he also had an accomplice in all this, and the reason his accomplice was willing to work with him, but we get a very brief hint of the motive, and it's because the 2 men served prison time together. The one was violent towards the other while in prison, so he does it for revenge. And that kind of a motive, oh my god, it's so good. It keeps going, and I could not believe how many elements and tricks from a whodunit they put into this one episode. I wouldn't enjoy it as much if they did this in every single episode, or even more than probably a handful, just because of what this show is. But because this episode is so special and seems to cater right to my interests, this is a god tier episode to me. And I think I shall put it right beneath Firewalker. Next, we have another Monsters Week called Signs and Wonders. This is another religious-centric episode. The first kill of the episode is a man who is killed by 50 snakes that left 116 bites on him. It seems to suggest murder. Scully thinks the motive is probably religious in nature because of the symbol that snakes hold in religion. So they go to investigate a Tennessee church where snakes are used to measure how righteous someone is. There is this amazing up horrifying scene where we see a church service and then they bring out the snakes. It's so good. This episode is so good. I was so relieved to finally have some good episodes again. Yeah, so with the case, they are investigating the people who are close to the victim. So one is his girlfriend who was pregnant and is named Gracie, and her father is Father O'Connor, who runs the church with the snakes. There's also an enemy church which Gracie is now part of, and the reverend of this rival church tells the agents Gracie's own father is actually the father of her baby. Gracie goes into labor and she gives birth to live snakes. And yeah, it turns out in the end that the baby's father is not her father, but this reverend. And he was killing people to keep this fact a secret and also to try and get the rival church shut down. He ends up escaping and he moves to another state and starts working at a new church where he is just free to be a demon. At the new church, he like opens a drawer and there's a live mouse inside, and then a snake comes out of his mouth and eats the mouse. Okay, I think this is a phenomenal episode. The opening scene didn't have me, and I was like, oh brother, here we go, another mid-monster of the week. But the further it got in, I was like, wait, probably among my favorite monster of the weeks now. So I'm putting this in the God tier too, fight me. I'm gonna put this one right beneath Eve. Okay, looking at my list, I think I have one more favorite episode, so that will leave me with 14 favorites out of 100. That's fine. That's fine. All right. The next 2 episodes are probably going to make me a little bit emotional, so if I cry, well, that's just how it's going to be. In this next 2-parter, we finally get the real answers about what happened to Samantha Mulder. A ransom note is found at the scene of a young girl's kidnapping, and one of the lines on the ransom note matches that of another ransom note from another case in like 1986. The mother of the boy in that kidnapping is currently serving time in jail, although she states that the son just disappeared from the house without a trace. The kidnapping case with the ransom note, and based on like who the suspects are looking at, I was like, this is inspired by JonBenet, right? And I looked it up and it was like, yeah. The episode brings up walk-ins, which are mentioned in Red Museum, but are something that like, there's so much going on in Red Museum that I did not clock it. Walk-ins are enlightened souls who possess the body of another being. It's a way to ease suffering and prevent, in this case, children from going through something horrific. The walk-in takes their place and like the child kind of disappears. That's kind of the brief explanation. Mulder's mother dies by suicide after burning photos of Samantha, and Mulder begins to believe that she may have been murdered, so he begs Scully to do an autopsy on her. She's reluctant, but she does so, and she's able to determine that it was not murder. She had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, which is probably the leading reason she did this. While investigating the mother of the boy in a similar case to the current missing girl, Mulder starts working with a psychic, and he's told that his sister was a walk-in. Eventually, in the current kidnapping case, they find that a man who plays Santa Claus on this big Santa ranch videotapes kids who visit the ranch, and then he later kidnaps them and kills them. They catch the man and arrest him, and Mulder finds the grave of tons of children on the ranch. It's really disturbing. They start to lose me a little bit with the walk-in stuff, I'm not gonna lie. But the investigation in like the modern day case I find really interesting, so that keeps me invested and engaged throughout the entire episode. I think I'm gonna put this episode right below Christmas Carol in the fine category. Next is the second part, which is called Closure. It takes a long time to recover all of the bodies of the children. Spirits of these children climb up out of the earth and are freed. Again, this is the walk-in idea, and now we're seeing the spirits of the actual children. Mulder tells Scully he wishes his sister was in one of these graves so that it could all just be over. The psychic Mulder's been working with has a vision of his mother, which leads him to an Air Force base, where he finds a home that holds evidence that Spender and Samantha grew up together with CSM. Most likely after Samantha was returned from her abduction, she was returned to CSM. Scully also continues to look into Samantha's abduction using information from a file taken from Mulder's mother's home. She finds evidence that connects CSM to Samantha's abduction. And this is the one part that I'm like, I thought we established this in Colony, because CSM knows that Mr. Mulder knows something, which would suggest, therefore, that CSM knows something, but whatever. He ends up returning to the home with Scully, and he finds a diary that belonged to Samantha. They spend the whole night reading it, and she talks a lot about tests and experiments, and I'm going to read 2 of the quotes. Sometimes I think my memories were taken by the doctors, but not all of them. I remember faces. I think I had a brother with brown hair who used to tease me. I hope someday he reads this and knows I wish I could see his face for real. And then an entry from when she was 14. No more tests, no more questions. I'm getting out of here and not turning back. Tonight I'm going to run far, far away. I can't let them catch me. They'll kill me if they do. running for my life for the rest of my life. Scully ends up finding a police report about a girl who showed up at a hospital. They are able to track down the nurse and question her. When they reach the nurse's home, Mulder is too nervous to go talk to her because the path could all end here. So Scully asks if he would like her to go and talk to the woman, and Mulder agrees. So Scully goes and speaks with the nurse, and the nurse remembers the young woman. Undoubtedly, the young woman was indeed Samantha Mulder. It seems she did run away, but then she needed medical care and went to a hospital where she was found. CSM and some men went to pick her up, but when they stepped into her room, she was already gone, and she had just vanished without a trace. Mulder, meanwhile, goes wandering on foot a little ways, and he sees a spirit of Samantha who runs towards him. So now he knows that Samantha has died because of the walk-ins. Samantha was abducted. She was returned. She lived for a few years with CSM and Spender, where she continued to be tortured until she ran away, narrowly avoid being captured by seemingly her death. And Scully asks Mulder how he's doing, and he says, "I'm fine, I'm free." This is not a good episode to watch at 2:30 in the morning if you're kind of in a sad mood. Honestly, with as fucked up as so much of the mythos is, this episode is okay. I still don't love the whole walk-in thing. I can see Mulder feeling a sense of freedom even if he just knows that Samantha got the medical treatment she needed and then escaped from the hospital before CSM could catch her. But ultimately, I think, yeah, I don't know, I just need CSM dead right now. I feel bad for Mulder, but like mostly, like this poor girl. I'm gonna be pretty generous with closure because it really does hit hard, and I'm gonna put it right beneath Memento Mori. Luckily, we have two very ridiculous episodes now to kind of lighten the mood again. So first up is Ex-Cops. An LA police officer is being filmed for the show Cop, and Mulder and Scully end up working the case and investigating a monster who is drawn to fear. I just wrote in my notes here, a different genre is fun, but ultimately, not good. Yeah, this episode sucks. It's gonna go right above Endgame in FBI's Most Unwanted. I don't have anything else to say. Next up is First Person Shooter. This episode was written to be a sort of spiritual successor to Kill Switch. A mysterious video game character kills players at a virtual reality development lab. The lone gunmen are in the game and their lives are in danger, so Mulder goes into the game to help them, but then he ends up trapped in the video game, and Scully has to jump in to try and save him. This evil character was created by a woman who works at the development company as a sort of outlet for all of the casual misogyny she faces on a day-to-day basis. There's like almost some interest given what Scully experiences, but honestly, more importantly, what Gillian Anderson experiences on the set of the X-Files, and also the way that even Mulder is treating a woman who's a suspect in the killings. Just icky. But the episode is really campy. Like, it's bad, but it's camp. So it's not gonna be at the very bottom because it's funny. Sometimes X-Files episodes will open or end on a really dramatic voiceover monologue from either Scully or Mulder, and this one ends on a monologue where Mulder and Scully, they're walking out in their VR suits. They're wearing this crazy sci-fi armor. They're stepping out and Mulder says, like, "We came, we saw, we conquered." You can't make this shit up, man. So like I said, I can't put it at the very bottom because it's funny. So I am gonna put it right beneath Deep Throat, I think. And that is in the oh boy category. Next up we have All Things. This was the episode written and directed by Gillian Anderson. Scully considers the path her life is on when she encounters her ex-boyfriend, who is a professor she dated in medical school. It kind of serves as a spiritual successor to Never Again, but this time it's actually good. I think Miss Anderson did a really great job of taking us on the journey with Scully when she reconnects with this man who she once knew, and she could see herself just inserting herself back into her old life. I was like, oh my god, something is shifting for Scully. But then as she continues on this journey, she realizes that just because that is the path that maybe seems simple or the path that she was once comfortable on, it doesn't mean that's the path she belongs on or the path she wants. The episode opens with her getting dressed. She is at Mulder's apartment and Mulder is in bed. So this is the episode that confirms beyond a doubt that they are Thank God somebody finally did it. People often refer to season 7 as the season of secret sex. On-screen kiss, besides Triangle, which is like the dream sequence, takes place a few episodes into season 7. I won't tell you when, but yeah, a few episodes into season 7, so it's very possible they like get together then. Although my personal take, assuming we are going along with the fact that it did take them quite a long time to get together, I would say it's right after When the Ghost Stole Christmas. This episode is very different from many other X-Files episodes, but there's been enough experimental episodes at this point where I don't think it really takes you out of it. It's just a different kind of tempo. I think this is a fantastic episode. I really do. This is the first and only episode Gillian Anderson wrote. I think the fresh perspective is just awesome, especially as, unfortunately, David Duchovny's time as a principal role on the show is coming to a close. Spoiler alert. I think I'm going to put all things right above Beyond the Sea. It's pretty far up there for me. I just think it's a gorgeous episode. Maybe I'm also just in one of those periods in my life where I feel like things are changing and I want them to change, and I'm trying to forge my path, and so it really resonates. I don't know, but it's good, and boy, it's a relief to have a good X-Files episode when it gets to these seasons. Next, we have Hollywood AD. This is a David Duchovny written and directed episode. How fun! In Hollywood AD, the agents investigate a church bombing and an ancient religious artifact. They are followed around by a Hollywood screenwriter who is a friend of Skinner's, and then their case is turned into a major motion picture. So the screenwriter is definitely kind of annoying, but I think this episode is a lot better at poking fun at the agents and their cases than some of the other comedy episodes, so I much prefer this episode to Jose Chung, for example. On top of that, the case that they're actually working on is a good case. I don't think David Duchovny just like pulled random, I was gonna say shit out of his ass, but that's true. I don't think he did that. He like actually thought it out, which is so exciting. So I just told one of my besties I'm like making really quick progress on these late seasons. Yeah, some episodes I just don't have much to say anymore. I said, no, exactly, like, what do you want me to say besides a 3-sentence summary, and it's not very good. And they said, quote, very bad. Scully looked beautiful, though. I said, describes at least 40 episodes, unfortunately. She replied, 40 feels low, but so true. This is why I didn't cover all 200 plus episodes. I simply wouldn't make it. Okay, back to Hollywood AD. There's also a scene where Mulder and Scully are both taking a bath, not together, but separate baths, and they call each other, and they're like, hey, what do you think Skin Man's up to? So they call Skinner, and Skinner is also taking a bubble bath. It's so silly. At the end, they're at the movie premiere, and Mulder says that Skinner gave him his credit card so the two of them can go out, and they hold hands on their way out. And it keeps getting better because the agents are fictionalized for this film. And so Agent Scully is played by Téa Leoni, who was married to David Duchovny at the time. I'm not going to get into any of the personal relationships and rumors and drama and any of that in this video. That's just not what this video is for, but the layers that this has is crazy. This is such a good episode. This is a God tier episode. Now, where to put it in the God tier? I think I'm going to put it right beneath Quagmire. This is a great episode. This is my final God tier episode. Tragically, things go downhill from here for all but one episode. Fight Club is about two doppelgangers who don't know one another. Whenever they're in close proximity to one another, it wreaks havoc. Betty and Lulu, played by Kathy Griffin, and they're chaotic queens. The episode is so bad. Of all people who could be in the X-Files worst episode, it's Kathy Griffin. Yeah, I think Fight Club is probably going to be at the very, very, very bottom. There's just not a single redeeming factor. Okay, we're on to season 8, and I'm not covering the episode because I just did not want to, but you need to know going into season 8 that in the season 7 finale, Fox Mulder is abducted by aliens. So he is missing as we head into season 8, and we're picking up a few episodes into season 8. They are working on trying to find Mulder, where he may have gone. Scully tells Skinner in the season 7 finale that she is pregnant. I'll tell you now, it's definitely Mulder's baby. So yeah, that's a factor, and then they're trying to find Mulder, and an agent named John Doggett is assigned to the X-Files to help Scully with the investigation about Mulder's whereabouts and also just the X-Files. So yeah, that's who her new partner is. So yeah, David Duchovny left the show. He will be in a few episodes this season, and then he's in a tiny bit of season 9, but yeah, he's done. The first season 8 episode I'm going to cover is Roadrunners. Scully is investigating a murder case alone in a remote area, and she ends up being lured into the hands of a cult that seeks a new host for their giant parasite. Doggett manages to track her down and save her just in time, and Scully finally opens up to the idea of working with a new partner now that she has developed some trust in him. This episode is absolutely a standout of those final 2 seasons. The small town cult episode, which we are already familiar with, the parasite that they stick into Scully's spine, it's like, it's huge. It's like this. And they call it a he, and they're praising it like it's Jesus Christ himself. And mind you, she's also pregnant. Like, she does not want this fucking bug in her. I mean, you wouldn't want a bug in you anyway, but the stakes are very high for Scully. Doggett saving her life and saying, look, Scully, you can't keep pushing me away. We gotta be partners. You shouldn't have gone on this case on your own. And she's like, yeah, you're right. It's a powerful moment. Roadrunners is an excellent episode. I think this is our final excellent episode of the list. In fact, now where should it go in the I'm gonna put Roadrunners right beneath Red Museum in the excellent tier. Yeah, looking at this, I think I'm gonna end up moving Red Museum down quite a ways, but Roadrunners will probably stay there. We will get to a brief edit of the chart once I get through all the episodes. I'll probably end up moving around about a dozen episodes. I'm not gonna let myself reorder the whole thing. There's a reason I did it this way, where I think about every episode carefully before I rank it. It's because I'll forget things. All of it needs to be important in the rankings. Let's keep moving on. Next up we have This Is Not Happening. Skinner informs Scully of a UFO sighting, and a woman who was abducted the night before Mulder's abduction is returned, but in really bad shape. And so Scully is fearing that Mulder may be dead. They bring on an agent named Monica Reyes, who specializes in religious studies and ritualistic crime. Mulder's body turns up. He's dead. Scully tries to get some help, but unfortunately the only people who may have any knowledge that could possibly help her help Mulder are taken away in a UFO before she can talk to them. So we'll come back to this. In Dead Alive, Mulder is buried. I just wrote in my notes, kill me, man. Scully says at his burial, quote, the truth he worked so hard to find was never truly revealed to him. Okay, so what is the truth? Because he knows what happened to Samantha. So this line, to me, just takes away any weight that episode's supposed to have. I don't know if he means like the truth about all these government conspiracies and whatever, but they've been trying to wrap that up. Every Mythos episode they think they've like wrapped it up again, and they just never do actually wrap it up. So I guess, sure, he doesn't know the truth. Whatever. I won't nitpick that one line anymore, but something had to be said. Despite Mulder's death, Doggett plans to stay on the X-Files so that it won't shut down when Scully begins her maternity leave. She tells him that he should get out while he still can. God, I miss season 4. Literally nothing is the same once they move to Los Angeles with the production. Nothing's the same. Billy Miles, who you may recall because I told you his name when discussing the pilot episode, specifically so that when we got to this episode, you would have heard the name at least once before. I will roll the clip here. Several teenagers have gone missing, including a young man named Billy Miles. Billy Miles is another man who was abducted years ago, but then also again when Mulder was abducted, and his body was dumped earlier, presumed to be dead, but he's actually alive. So a dead man is now alive. Okay. Skinner tells Doggett that they shouldn't tell Scully about this yet because they don't want to get her hopes up, but yeah, it turns out Mulder is also actually still alive. And then Krychek shows up and says that he can help save Mulder's life if Scully terminates her pregnancy. And so in order to protect Scully from all this bullshit, Skinner unplugs Mulder's life support machines because he is willing to let Mulder die in order to not put Scully at risk. Like, it's not even just about the baby, but I think he knows that as soon as she is pulled down this path where Krychek or whoever else is an enemy is dragging her around, like, who knows what will happen. Doggett goes to try and reason with Krychek, but Krychek just smashes the vaccine that could potentially save Mulder. It turns out that being on life support was actually making Mulder worse. And since Skinner has unplugged his life support, Mulder has been able to heal a bit, and he wakes up and he's alive, and he makes a joke, and Scully laughs and cries, and that's it, and he's okay. There's never been a truer meaning of "it's so over, we are so back." This Is Not Happening is a not the best episode that I'm gonna put right above Colony, and Dead Alive is also a not the best episode, but I'm gonna rank it above This Is Not Happening because I'm glad that Mulder's okay. Next we have 3 Words, which basically is just a bad episode where they try to segue back into normalcy, but it's, I don't know, the show is like so far gone at this point. Yeah, Mulder doesn't know what his place anymore, which is very understandable, by the way. Like, Mulder is going through some shit, but yeah, again, because of the format of this program, we really just don't have time to deal with. So there's this scene where he tells Scully that he's happy for her, that she's pregnant, and that things worked out. I'm like, this man is so... Like, you are the father. Get up. It's not clicking for him. Stuff where he's like feeling kind of lost is, yeah, like that all makes sense, but then there's just this other disconnect, and it doesn't feel like Mulder at all anymore, but not in a compelling way where it's something that he needs to work through because of all the trauma like Scully did with her post-abduction. It's just not well written. Yeah, 3 Words is an awful episode. I think I'm gonna put it right beneath 731. And then we have the 2-part season 8 finale, Essence and Existence. So in the first part, Essence, Scully is nervous that her baby is an alien, or that something is wrong with her baby because of government or alien interference. We do learn that Scully's OBGYN turns out to be a man who's a co-founder of Zeus Genetics, where women were being impregnated with alien babies. So like, yeah, that's a cause for alarm. Scully's mother hires a nurse for her just to help her out through all of this, and the nurse tells Scully that her baby is very special and she wants to help protect it. So now everyone, as in like Scully, Mulder, Scully's mom, John Doggett, Monica Reyes, and Skinner, are all concerned that there's gonna be, or that there was, some kind of interference with Scully's pregnancy. So they just need to get her through the delivery of this baby safely. Billy Miles has morphed into this indestructible alien super soldier, and he is now after Scully and the baby. So Mulder helps her pack up her things, and they flee in a car driven by Krychek, go to the FBI headquarters to come up with a game plan, and they throw Billy Miles out of the 10th story, and he falls all the way down and gets crushed in a trash compactor. So surely he's dead, right? Existence. It turns out Billy Miles is not dead. They like grab a piece of his metal spine out of the trash compactor, and it like spins around and forms a new spine, and he like regrows out of it. Monica Reyes takes Scully to a safe house to deliver her baby, and Scully ends up going into labor. At one point in the parking garage, Krychek is attempting to harm Mulder, so Skinner shoots Krychek in the head and kills him, and I gotta say, my only regret is that it wasn't me, because I hate that guy. Scully gives birth, they end up being found, and they are surrounded by super soldiers who all kind of close in on Scully, and they all want to take her baby. The baby is born, and all these aliens just kind of leave her alone. So it's basically a reveal that there never actually was anything wrong with her baby after all, which is a great thing. So yeah, she goes home, and the lone gunmen all visit her, and then Mulder visits her, and she introduces him to the baby, who is a boy. She is named William, after Mulder's father, but also after her father and her big brother. Everyone is named William on the show. Yeah, she holds the baby, and he makes a joke that William looks suspiciously like Assistant Director Skinner, and they giggle, and then they kiss with William between them. That is where the series should have ended. Just like, let them have a fucking happy ending after all this shit. But God forbid Fox not make any more money, so there's a whole nother season, which I will not be covering. Earlier I said that killing Melissa Scully was one of the show's biggest mistakes. The other biggest mistake in season 9, Scully ends up giving William up for adoption because too many people are like after him. Because, you know, they say like, oh no, he's not an alien baby, and then they just kind of change their mind. And it's just cruel. And like, Mulder is in hiding for most of season 9. That's how they explain away his absence. And like, I'm sorry, but take your son with you, or pass your son over to his uncles, the lone gunmen, and they can go into hiding with him for a couple months until things are safe again. Like, to me, when I try and make this canon make any kind of sense in my head, or like redeem it in any way, that's what happens. That's what should have happened. But as far as Essence and Existence go, let's rank those real quick. They're kind of oh boy territory to me, honestly. The final scene of Existence is great, but you have to watch a lot of bullshit to get there. And then ultimately the scene means nothing because of the fact they keep going. But it means something to me. And I think a lot of X-Files fans I've talked to have all agreed that, like, yeah, they should have just pulled the plug there. Sorry if that doesn't make any sense, but a girl does what she has to do to cope. Essence and Existence, I think they're just both gonna go right beneath Zero Sum in the oh boy category. And last but not least, we have the second feature film called I Want to Believe. This takes place several years after the conclusion of the series. It is more of a Monster of the Week film than it is a Mythos film, which I appreciate because I feel like we've dragged it on long enough. So Scully is now working as a doctor at a private hospital, and Mulder is just basically living off the grid. They live together, they are together as a couple. An FBI agent is kidnapped, and Scully is tracked down in order for her to ask Mulder for his help on the case. There is a priest helping the current investigators on the case who claims to have psychic information about the case, but he's also a convicted pedophile. Yeah, it is a supernatural thriller film that deals with faith and belief, as many X-Files episodes do, as well as psychic and spiritual connections. There is a connection between the priest and a man who he molested as a boy. Scully is pretty hesitant to go anywhere near the X-Files again because she just doesn't want to go into that darkness anymore. At the end of the film, Scully and Mulder agree that they will step away from the darkness, as far away from it as they can get together, and they kiss. The rockiness in their relationship is smoothed out by the end. There's also a very sweet scene where they are snuggling in bed and she's like, scratchy beard. It's the cutest scenes. I Want to Believe, honestly, gives us very little, but it does give us a really cute shot of them cuddling. But at what cost? I'm gonna put I Want to Believe. I'm gonna put it in oh boy. I'm gonna put it, it's gonna go right above One Breath. No, it's gonna go, why is, okay, first person shooter shouldn't be that high. No, first person shooter can be that high because it's funny. I Want to Believe is gonna go right above Deep Throat and oh boy. That's fine. Okay. So that's all of the episodes. I think now what I'm gonna do is just go to the top and go through one category at a time and make a few adjustments. I went with my gut with ranking everything where it should be, so I'm not gonna mess around with it too much. If there's anything that really sticks out to me as something I need to move, or a category in particular I need to rearrange, this is the opportunity to do so. Looking at my God tier, we have, in descending order, Home, Bad Blood, Ice, Quagmire, Hollywood AD, Detour, Firewalker, The Amazing Bellini, War of the Coprophages, Darkness Falls, How the Ghost Stole Christmas, Eve, Signs and Wonders, and Triangle. I think I want to put Eve on the bottom of this list, and Darkness Falls right above that. And yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm fine with this. So that is a grand total of 14 favorite episodes. Hold on, let me see if that's more or less than what's in FBI's Most Unwanted. That's less. Okay. Next up, we have the excellent tier. Reading this in descending order, we have Irresistible, The Host, All Things, Beyond the Sea, Paper Hearts, Our Town, ANASAZI, The Blessing Way, Ascension, Duane Barry, TOOMS, Squeeze, Leonard Betts, Red Museum, Roadrunners, OUIBLIETTE. Red Museum just feels too high. I'm gonna move Red Museum down to the middle of solid tier. I'm gonna put it, for the moment, beneath .com, above Little Green Men. And then I'm gonna move, I'm not overly concerned with the exact order of the tiers. There's a reason I'm doing tiers and not just a list from 1 to 100. And like looking at this group of episodes, it feels like they all belong in the same realm, so I'm happy. Next up, we have solid episodes, again in descending order. Fight the Future, Clyde Bruckman, Die Hand, Die Verletzt, Orison, Wetwire.com, Red Museum, Little Green Men, Erlenmeyer, FLASK, Pilot, Monday, and Humbug. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that too. We'll see if anything needs to be moved up to those tiers, but there's nothing that feels too out of place there. Next up, we have the Fine category, and it goes Memento Mori, Closure, The Sixth Extinction, Part 1, Biogenesis, Too Shy, Fire, The End, Caddish, Grotesque, Christmas Carol, Sign and Zeet, The Rain King, Talitha Kumi. Okay, Grotesque needs to be moved. I think I keep getting stuck on Grotesque. For now, I'm going to put Grotesque right beneath the Jersey Devil in the not the best category. The rest of the fine tier seems to be okay, but I think I'm going to move Arcadia and also Never Again into the fine category, right above Christmas Carol. So yeah, it goes Arcadia, Never Again, Christmas Carol, Sign and Zeet. Caddish, I think that feels better. Next is not the best, and we have Postmodern Prometheus, The Beginning, Pusher, Dead Alive, This Is Not Happening, Colony, The Jersey Devil, Grotesque, Milagro, Killswitch, Shadows, Space, Ghost in the Machine, Tunguska, Terma. I think Colony is going to go above Dead Alive and This Is Not Happening. And I think The Beginning I'm going to move down to below Colony. And I'm also going to move Jersey Devil up right beneath Colony. Pusher, Colony, Jersey Devil, The Beginning, Dead Alive, This Is Not Happening. Yeah, that feels right. Okay, next we have Oh Boy. And it's going to go Chinga, Three of a Kind, I Want to Believe, Deep Throat, First Person Shooter, One Breath, Field Trip, Musings of a Cigarette Smoking Man, Zero Sum, Existence, Essence, Nisei, E.B.E. I'm going to move E.B.E. up to right beneath Deep Throat. So yeah, Chinga, Three of a Kind, I Want to Believe, Deep Throat, E.B.E. First Person Shooter. I like that better. And then finally we have the FBI's Most Unwanted. This is the hardest category to rank. I'm going to move Fearful Symmetry down. Paperclip, I dislike even more than I... Do I? No. This is fine. I think this is fine. There's no single episode within here where I'm like, whoa, that's not right. So yeah, I think this is it. I think we're done. I'm done. I feel like I've said all I have to say. As I stated before, I will leave a copy of the tier list, and yeah, that way you can do your own tier ranking. More videos to come soon. I'm excited to continue working on some projects. This video has been such a labor of love and a labor of hate. I would love if you would consider subscribing so you can be around for my next video. If this is your first time here, welcome. Currently I have deep dives into Desperate Housewives and Nurse Jackie available on the channel, and there will be lots more media commentary to come soon. I believe the next episode I'm going to be putting out will be tier ranking plots from Melrose Place. So yeah, this was my first time kind of experimenting with a tier ranking, and I think that's what I'm going to do next. It will probably be even more chaotic. I'm also considering doing a tier ranking of every episode of Desperate Housewives. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. But I don't want to only do Desperate Housewives content, obviously. I hope you have a very happy new year. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next time. Bye!